Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today we have a big show in store for you. If you're new to the program, you've never tuned into our program before, first of all, this is On the Move with Mac Worley. I, of course, am your host, Mac Worley III. We talk about all sorts of things here. We talk about philosophy, rights, natural law, government, guns, politics, the news of the day. I give you my perspective, which is from a libertarian with conservative leanings. I apply the news through that lens. So, again, I don't believe that anyone can be truly non-biased. Everybody that you hear, any pundit that's talking, is giving you their opinion. They may be giving you some news, but through their analysis, it's opinion. And I make no qualms about that. This is an opinion show. If you're tuning in, you're here to hear my opinion. So, just putting that out there. And so let's go ahead and give a heads up. First of all, today's show is titled "Don't Fight Fire with Fire." This is episode 152 of On the Move with Mac Worley. Today's featured topics: we're going to talk about Senator Warren, how she was silenced on the Senate floor. You've probably heard about this throughout the week. I want to talk about radicals on both sides of the aisle that want to blow up the system, and I want to lay out who these players are on both sides. Then I want to talk about a news story that I've just recently heard. It was on the Daily Mail, I believe, and it's talking about how Edward Snowden, may be returned to the United States as a gift from Russia to Donald Trump. So we definitely want to talk about that. Then from there, I want to talk about how there's been more than 12,000 tweets that have been calling for Donald Trump's assassination. And I want to talk about how it's been rumored. Now, these are leaks, so we don't know how accurate this is. And, I don't know if this is accurate or not. So I'm going to give you my opinion on this piece here. The article is titled "Trump Paused a Call with Putin to Make an Aide Explain a Nuclear Arms Treaty." It's the New START agreement. This is something that I actually have a lot of familiarity with, the original START program and even New START itself. This is something that I personally have dealt with, being security forces in the United States Air Force. My job was to secure nuclear weapons, and we were governed by this START treaty. So I want to talk about this from that perspective. And anyway, we got a lot more to talk about. Sorry, by the way, first of all, that I didn't do a show last week. I've been really sick, so I'm finally getting over it and everything, and it's all good. I hope you all enjoyed the Super Bowl. That was a really interesting last half. But yeah, anyway. That's our show. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We do have two guests that are going to be joining us. My good friend Dick Lapre, he's going to be joining us to talk about the jobs report, and he's got some excellent analysis, so I'm really excited to talk to him about that. He'll be joining us in about 10 minutes, and then from there, in the next hour, the hour two, top of hour two, we're going to be joined by Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant. We're going to talk Trump and all that stuff, but also what I think is particularly important for us to talk about, and Dan's going to give us some insight on, is the case of Mike Strickland. Many of you may have been familiar with Mike. He's a friend of mine. He does Laughing at Liberals, and he was arrested and charged with, I believe it was 21 or 22 felonies for pulling a firearm for the purpose of his own self-defense. He was being assaulted by protesters in Portland, and he drew his gun because he felt that he was in fear for his safety. He didn't shoot anybody. He drew his gun and backed away, and the gun gave him the space that he needed to get away from these people who were assaulting him. And he's been going through this trial, and we have an update that you guys aren't going to want to miss, and that's at the beginning of the second hour, so you don't want to go anywhere for that. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to start diving right in, and then shortly after that, we're going to be joined by Dick LaPree. So you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. So, I want to dive into this travel ban that was imposed through executive order. Now, whether or not you agree or disagree with the ban, whether or not you think it is a Muslim ban, which, by the way, we spoke about on the last episode, I don't believe this to be a Muslim ban. First of all, the 7 countries were picked from a law that Obama signed into office himself. So it's not like these were just picked because they were the biggest countries or the most populous countries with Muslims in it. This was from a law, and these countries were labeled countries of concern. So and just to point out, if it was a Muslim ban, it wouldn't make sense why they aren't going after Saudi Arabia for the ban. Furthermore, it wouldn't make sense why they're not going after Afghanistan or, for that matter, Indonesia, which, from what I recall, is the most populated Muslim country in the world. So if it was a Muslim ban, why wouldn't you go after all these countries? Again, the source for the list of these 7 nations, it came from a law signed into law by Obama. So anyway, but the courts have been striking this down. So first of all, I just want to give you my take on this Muslim ban before we have Dick LaPree on the show. First of all, I personally think that we as a nation, we have every right to control who enters into our country. We ought to do that. Every nation has their own sovereignty and can and should decide who they want to enter the country and who they don't. So for that, I have no issues with that. What I do have an issue with is just two things. First of all, I'm not particularly fond of the whole executive order thing. It's not really my thing. I don't like the idea that the President of the United States signs executive orders, which is essentially writing law. So I have an issue with that. Now, the president may very well, according to law, have every right to in emergency situations to decide immigration bans and things like that. But I still don't like the idea of executive orders. That's my problem with it. And the second thing is obviously the way it was rolled out. And the way it was rolled out was no coordination between these agencies that are going to be enforcing the ban. They find out as the executive order has been signed. And that is the problem, because it created a chaotic scene, which is really just a gift to the left-wing media. You know, they're showing all of the people that were damaged or hurt by this executive order. So now they're going through and showing each individual case of everybody who has been affected by this law. And personally, just from that perspective, I think it's kind of stupid to implement it this way. Now, I'm not calling Donald Trump stupid. I'm not calling his administration stupid. I'm just saying it doesn't make a whole lot of political sense to put yourself in a position like that to where you're vulnerable for a lot of criticism. But that's my take on it. I could go on further about this, but we are joined now by Dick Lepre. First of all, hey, Dick, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, Dick. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you about this BLS report. And one thing in particular, Donald Trump has, in the past few weeks here, he has been excited about this report. He said it's showing good things. In the past, he has called this report fake. So the very first thing I want to touch on is, do you think that this report is fake? And in fact, before you do that, would you mind giving out your website? And also, I forgot to give you your intro here, why people should be listening to you and everything. So Dick is a senior loan advisor for RPM Mortgage of Alamo, California. He's been doing mortgages since 1991 and writing a weekly newsletter about mortgages and the economy in general since 1995. Dick is from New York City and has his degree in physics from Notre Dame. So, Dick, what do you think? Is the BLS report reliable? Can we trust it? Is it fake?
Well, I don't think it in any sense is fake. That is to say, none of the data is fabricated. I do believe that this is a best effort thing. Also, the surveys that are taken are absolutely large. The number of companies that are surveyed, the number of households that are surveyed are enormous. So in that sense, just from a statistics point of view, these are excellent surveys. So I think the data itself is good. I think the things that we need to look at are, and you and I discussed this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, are particularly in the report, the most recent report, which is the report of the labor market in January. What's interesting is these reports all have what are called seasonal adjustments. And the idea of seasonal adjustment is very obvious at a time in a month like January. That is to say, everyone will agree that there's a lot fewer people selling Christmas trees in January than there were in December, and that there are a lot fewer department store Santas than there were in December. So it's natural to make seasonal adjustments to these. And the seasonal adjustment for January is relatively enormous. I want to go back and talk about what these reports are and in general, and then go over the report for January. Unless you want me to answer your question further.
Oh, no, I think you had a good explanation. So go ahead and talk about what you wanted to talk about then.
Well, the first thing to realize is that there's two separate reports, and they're called the Establishment Report and the Household Report. The Establishment Report is a survey of businesses. They literally look at 141,000 businesses, which represents 486,000 individual work sites. And that's the employer side of it. Then they also survey households. And they're surveying households mainly to find out how many people are actually looking for work. Or if they're going to a job site, they can find out how many people are working. If they go to somebody's home and do a survey, they're going to find out how many people say that they're looking for work. So the household survey is a survey of 60,000 households each month. So these are, as I said, these are relatively large surveys. And then let's look, though, at the particular data from the report that we're talking about, the report for January. Now, we look at this, again, the reports always quote seasonal adjustments. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line was that there were 220, seasonally adjusted, there were 227,000 more people working in January than in December. Now, the first thing that I always do, and I write a newsletter every week, which you can get on my website, which is loanmine, LOANMINE.com. And if you go there and click at the top, there's a thing that says Rate Watch Newsletter. You can either look at the old ones or subscribe to it. But in any case, one of the things that I do is I look at the adjustments. Each report adjusts the numbers for the previous 2 months, assuming that they have better data now than they had last month. So the first thing I do is say, well, what were the adjustments for the past 2 months? Now, if you look at the adjustments in the latest report, there were 39,000 jobs lost from the previous 2 months per the report in December. So actually, the number of people working was not the number of more people. The number of more jobs was not 227,000, but rather 188,000. So I always first look at the headline number, which is what everybody pays attention to, and then I take into account the changes for the previous 2 months. And then let's talk about the seasonal adjustment. And this is why when we look at the seasonal adjustment for January, it's like I said, there aren't a lot of people selling Christmas trees in January, and there are a lot of department store Santas. So in January, you always have an enormous seasonal adjustment. If you answer the following question, forgetting seasonal adjustments, how many more people were working in January than in December? The answer is, well, there weren't more people. There were actually almost 3 million. Well, again, I shouldn't say more people working, but jobs. There were actually 2.9 million fewer jobs in January than in December. But that's not what we look at. We always look at the seasonal adjustment. Like I said, we all know, and everybody will accept the reasonableness that there's a large seasonal adjustment to accommodate essentially Christmas shopping. And that happens every year. Mm-hmm. Now, when I look at the data for that particular month, I question how useful it is to look at data in a month like January when the adjustment is, let's just say, approximately 15 times the size of the change in the data. Mm-hmm. So the question then is, are we really looking at the adjustment, or are we looking at the accuracy of the adjustment, or are we really measuring the labor market? And again, you asked at the beginning, do I think this is fake? No, I don't think this is fake. I think this is a best effort thing to estimate how many people are working. And I think it's important with this particular report to note that these seasonal adjustments are done by a well-defined computer program which has been around for, I don't know, at least 20 years or so, which takes into account seasonal adjustments. In other words, one can get the data and plug it in oneself and come up with the same number as BLS did. Now, I contrast that with other reports, other government reports, such as the BEA's report on GDP, which comes up with some sort of magic number for inflation to adjust nominal dollars into so-called real dollars each month. There is no explanation as to where BEA gets its monthly adjustment for inflation. In the case of the BLS report, this number is generated by a computer program which one could literally get on the internet, and it's a program that's been around for years, and it just simply looks at changes in employment, for example, on a month-to-month basis, and it just tells you historically what the appropriate seasonal adjustment is going from December to January.
So, do you think that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, do you think that this report on the unemployment rate and the labor participation rate, do you think this is accurate then?
Well, I think it's as accurate. Yeah, I mean, it's as accurate. It certainly is as accurate as any other piece of macroeconomic data out there. And in that sense, if you're implying that you have some sort of suspicions of it, I would say this is one of the reports that I'm probably the least suspicious of, because number one, big sample sizes. You can't argue with big sample sizes. Mm-hmm. And number two, the transparency of the adjustments. The fact that seasonal adjustment is not something that's magically calculated, but is something that one could literally get a copy of the program, plug it into your computer, and make the calculation for yourself any month. So I guess the only question, the only part of it that I would cast any doubt on is the household report. In other words, I'm much more willing to believe that businesses want to accurately report data because it's in their interest to have accurate data, right? If you're running a business, you really would like to know what the jobs market is doing rather than provide incorrect data to sort of confuse yourself and everybody else about the state of the labor market. But I think the household survey is inherently less reliable because it's just people discussing or answering a survey for somebody without really any large significant measure of accountability. In other words, people might, let's just say for political reasons, say that they are or aren't in the labor market, particularly just before or after elections, or for whatever reason. So I'm much more trusting of the establishment survey than the household survey. But that said, it's still a big survey, so I don't think that we have significant reason to distrust either of them.
So one of the things that I frequently hear, and I've commented on myself, is this the major difference between the labor participation rate, which I'm looking at your newsletter. You say it rose from 62.7% to 62.9%. So from a year ago, and that means that roughly 29%, 28% of people are not participating in the labor force. But then you compare that with the unemployment rate that rose from 4.7 to 4.8%. And I'm just curious, does that seem odd to you, or is there an explanation for this?
Well, when you look at this particular report, okay, there's one thing when I wrote my newsletter. One thing that I didn't understand from the raw data was that one of the key numbers, and when you're talking about things like the labor participation rate, the key piece of data is called the civilian non-institutional adult population.
I was waiting for you to.
In other words, that's everybody who's over 16 and not in jail and not in the army and not in a mental institution. So there's everybody every adult that could potentially be working. Now, of course, the main reason that people aren't working, or there's a big difference between the labor participation rate and the unemployment rate, is that a lot of people are retired. So we're at a time when, due to the demographics of the population, we should be seeing a relatively constant and slow decline in the labor participation rate as more people retire. And I think that from my perspective, the one thing that we always need to be looking at is the labor participation rate, because it measures, in essence, people who are working, which is essentially the tax basis for the federal government. These are the people who are working, who are contributing income tax and whatever, presumably going out and spending money and keeping the economy going. Mm-hmm. So if the labor participation rate falls because there's more people on Social Security and pensions, then it becomes more difficult, I think, to sustain the economy. We're certainly seeing this happen in places like Japan, and we're starting to see it happen in the United States.
So with the unemployment rate, though, from what I understand, they don't count people who aren't looking for work. They don't count people who, for example, if you got laid off from your job and that was a full-time position, but you were only able to find part-time work to replace it, you're no longer considered unemployed, obviously. But even though
that's correct. But there was a major change recently during the Obama administration. That was, if I have the numbers correctly, it used to be the case that you had to be looking for work as it is now, you have to be looking for work at any time in the last 6 months to be counted as part of the labor force, whereas it used to be the case that you had to be looking for work any time in the past 12 months to be counted as part of the labor force.
So you don't even necessarily have to have a job to be considered part of the labor participation rate. You just have to be looking for a job.
Correct. You need to be working or looking for work.
Do they have any stats or figures about how many people that are being considered part of the labor participation rate actually aren't working? They're just looking for jobs?
Well, I don't. I mean, it's in the report, but I don't have it in the notes that I brought with me.
I see. Okay.
In other words, we just look at the size of the labor force. So the things that we look at are the civilian non-institutional population, then the actual size of the labor force. And like I said, I just don't have that at hand right now.
I understand. So I noticed from your report that the civilian non-institutional adult population decreased by 660,000.
Well, it decreased by 660,000.
Oh, did I say increase? I apologize.
And that's something that I have absolutely no explanation for. In other words, I don't think it's the case that 660,000 people were so scared of Donald Trump that they left the country. Okay, I mean, I think that is just sort of a data anomaly, hopefully, which will be corrected in the future reports. I just can't believe that somehow 660,000 people disappeared from the... We're not talking about the labor force. We're talking about the civilian non-institutional adult population. Mm-hmm. So I think in this report, it's a little hard to look at the accuracy of the labor participation rate when the data about how many people in the non-institutional adult population appears to be a bit hard to believe.
So we're just missing 660,000 people, no idea what happened to them, but yet they're telling us that the labor participation
it could be like X-Files. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know where they went.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
seriously. I mean, to be honest, I think it's just somebody messed up the data somewhere, and hopefully it'll be corrected, because there isn't any reason why that many people, we lost that many adults.
We lost over 500,000 people. It's no explanation.
Yeah, it's flu season, and it's much worse than they're telling us.
Yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, I looked at it and I said, I couldn't even conjure up, other than being goofy, I couldn't conjure up an explanation of that one. So I'm just saying, you know what? Let's not even look at that particular thing this month. And again, I think you said at the beginning, is this stuff fake or whatever? Well, here it is. They're telling what the data is, and obviously there's sort of a hole in it there, but it's not like we have to worry about that one particular number.
So,
the other thing I want to mention here, there's several things that we should be... when you see this stuff reported on TV, they always talk about two numbers. They talk about how many more jobs there are, and then they talk about the unemployment rate. And that's it. And I think that one of the problems is, going back to a lot of us grew up watching the news on TV, and the way television, the nightly news was designed, it's designed to cover a topic like this in a period of, in no more than 30 seconds. So this isn't something that could be easily understood in 30 seconds, or more accurately, the only thing you could talk about in 30 seconds is there's so many more jobs and this is the unemployment rate, have a nice day, and that's the end of it. But a couple of important points. Remember, we're not counting people working. We're counting jobs. So the number of jobs could have increased by 227,000, but those could all have been people who are working two jobs. There had been months in 2016 when the number of jobs increased, but the number of people working actually decreased. In other words, more people were working two jobs, but fewer people were working. So again, this isn't counting people working, this is counting jobs.
So
this being the establishment survey.
Would that kind of coincide with the narrative that a lot of people are losing their full-time employment, and as a result they're having to pick up one or two part-time jobs? So there are...
Well, let me answer that by going into something that you saw at the top of that report that I emailed you. There's an excellent paper written by an economist named Alan Kruger. Alan is a professor of economics at Princeton. He was Obama's chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Very bright guy, very well published. And he published a report this last year that I found absolutely incredible. And it said the following. He looked at all of the net employment growth in the U.S. economy from 2005 and 2015, from 2005 to 2015. So a 10-year period. And he determined that 94% of the increase in jobs was in what he called alternative employment. So he's defining alternative employment as something other than a W-2 full-time job. 94% of all the gains in jobs in that 10-year period were from things like part-time employees, on-call employees, contract workers, self-employment, temps. So the incredible thing is we've had a remarkable change in the nature of work. We've had almost zero increase in W-2 full-time jobs. Almost every job gain, 94% of the job gains were that. People self-employed, contract workers, temps, people who are on call. And that, I think, is as significant as any other single bit of data about the jobs market. In other words, the jobs, looking at the numbers is one thing, but knowing that these are not people who are working full-time W-2 jobs is much more significant.
Absolutely. Dick, we got to cut to a commercial break. Would you mind sticking with us through the break?
No problem.
All right. Folks, we'll be right back. I want to talk more with Dick LaPree about this BLS report. I actually want to specifically talk about why we might have had this change in the nature of work. So when we come back, you guys aren't going to want to miss this. We're going to talk about this, and I got a whole lot more that I want to pick Dick's brain here on. So anyway, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bear Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. So at this point, I'm bringing Dick LaPree back on the line. Hey, Dick, are you there?
Yes.
All right. So I wanted to ask you. You said we were talking about how the employment sector, 94% of the gains have been in this alternative employment, which is essentially non-traditional W-2 jobs. And
correct.
I'm just curious, what do you think is the cause of this remarkable change, as you said, in the nature of American workforce?
Well, I mean, I don't really know. I would attribute it possibly to two things. To some extent, it might have to do with the requirements of Obamacare, which necessitate, that an employer get you your health insurance if you work full time, basically. And some of it may just be simply that business has found that this is a much more tolerable way of doing things, that it's just more advantageous to them. I mean, we even have a lot of tech people here in the Bay Area who work for companies like Google who are not really full-time W-2 people. These are not people who are going to be around for a while, but are maybe hired for just a period of time, like a year or so. So I think that business has just decided that it's in their own interest to not make people full-time and give them a nice, comfortable feeling that they have a job sort of forever. And that's a significant change to people.
Would you say that we're basically ending an era of, because my grandfather and a lot of people in his generation were working in like steel factories and things like that, where they were trying to work for 20, 30, 40 years and retire with a pension. Do you think that the days of retiring with a pension are essentially over?
Well, I don't think that they're over. I think that they're, like as you're pointing out, they're just diminished. In other words, that fewer people have that, whether it's retiring with a pension or just knowing that you're going to have a job next year. I don't think that in general people are as secure in their jobs as they once were. I'm not trying to say that everybody is insecure. I'm just trying to say everybody is a little bit less secure than they once were. I think that these are just largely business decisions, that business has decided this is the way to maximize their own profits, and this is acting in their own best interest. Maybe it's a question of, let's keep people on their toes. Let's let people know that, things aren't permanent, to get them to work harder and keep working. Or maybe it's just business way of spending as little money as possible. I don't know that it has any one answer.
So obviously they're tracking how many full-time and part-time jobs that are being created if they're going to have this 94% of the gains stat. Basically, from and this is based on my experience as well, I'm noticing that a lot of the jobs out in the market now are part-time, and very few places, like my employer, for example, they only have a certain amount of full-time positions available, and that is a direct result of Obamacare, as you said, might be one of the causes. They typically only employ part-time workers, and then you also have companies that are being called, basically, it's people that are exploiting a loophole, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but people like Uber or Lyft that employ their drivers as contractors. Based on what I'm seeing, and this is just somebody looking out in the job market myself, it does kind of match with this alternative employment aspect, because it just seems like there are fewer and fewer jobs that are available that will have the full-time benefits. And again, this report, this BLS report, especially in terms of the unemployment rate and the labor participation rate, if you lost your full-time job and you're looking to get another job to replace it, and you have to get two part-time jobs to replace it because you couldn't find a full-time employment. Let me ask you, if you were to lose those two part-time jobs, does that count as a layoff? Does that count as being unemployed? Are you added to those figures of unemployment again?
Well, first of all, then 2 jobs were lost from the total number of jobs. Okay, and then if you're looking for a job and you don't have either of those jobs, then yes, you're unemployed, but you're only one unemployed person. So you're one unemployed person, but 2 jobs were lost from the total.
So they are counting people who lose part-time jobs. Is that correct?
Yes. In other words, if in your example, if Mr. Smith loses two part-time jobs and he's the only person whose employment status changed last month, then there'd be 2 fewer jobs in that month.
I see. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, because I have heard in the past people saying that they do not count job losses of part-time jobs. So you're saying that's incorrect?
That's incorrect, yes.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure. So let's move over to another area which I actually wanted to pick your brain about some more based on the last conversation we had. First of all, before we get to it, because I want to talk about the GDP to debt ratio that we talked about before last show. But
yes,
I want to ask before we do that, do you think that we are heading into a recession? I'm now hearing on a lot of left-leaning news sources that hadn't said anything during the entire Obama administration about economic issues. You know, they were projecting all sorts of great things for us, and I was hopeful, but I've been saying for a long time that I think we're already in a recession, or at a minimum headed towards one. And I wonder, what do you think about the state of the economy? Are we okay?
Well, I think, first of all, let's just look at what GDP has done recently. And I track every month. Every month I write a report on a newsletter on the job situation, and I write a report on GDP. Well, actually, I don't write a report on GDP, but a guy named Rick Davis of Consumer Metrics, who's a buddy of mine, does it, and I just simply use Rick's because, honestly, his is the best analysis of GDP that I've ever been able to find. Now, if you look at GDP and ask the following question, what is the average GDP growth rate for the past 5 years? The answer is 2.01%. So that is to say, before you start saying, well, are we headed for a recession, look, 2.01% GDP growth rate is pretty weak. It's about as weak as there is, okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's better than 1%, but it's still not that good. I think that an economy such as ours, which has as much debt as ours, really requires a GDP growth rate of approximately 4% in order to be able to maintain. We have so much outstanding government debt, and I'm talking really about two things. I'm talking about the so-called national debt, and I'm talking about the underfundings of Social Security and Medicare. We have so much debt out there that we really need a growth rate of about 4% to be healthy. So I guess when you're asking the question, are we headed for a recession, the first question is, where are we right now? And the answer is, we're in a kind of an extended period of stagnation. This economic recovery from the liquidity crisis of 2008, 2009 has been extremely anemic. This has been extremely low growth. And this is despite the fact that we had near zero interest rates and an enormous, massive, gigantic expansion in money supply. That is to say, the Federal Reserve, which runs monetary policy, did everything it conceivably could. Low interest rates, increased money supply to help, and yet we had anemic GDP growth. So that's not good, because I think it means that the problem with the economy has nothing whatsoever to do with money supply. It doesn't have to do with the Fed, and there's not anything that the Fed can do to intervene to get over whatever the problem is. And I think that one of the big problems that's holding back economic growth is, well, a couple of things. One certainly is regulation. I think that this is something that is one of the points that Trump has made that I pretty much 100% agree with, that the sheer amount of government regulations is stifling. And stifling in the sense that it holds back the start of new businesses. Agreed. Who simply can't afford to keep up with the regulations. And it just winds up spending a lot of time and money on just complying with regulations rather than doing productive parts of business. You know, and look, as somebody who's in the mortgage business, we certainly know the extent to which regulation has increased, in the last 8 years. I mean, it's gigantic. One of the things that I was doing recently for a friend of mine who's an economist at Johns Hopkins was looking at what is the regulatory cost of building a new single-family residence. And I talked to a gentleman from the National Association of Home Builders, and their data, and I don't have it dead accurate, but it's sort of in my head, it's approximately $84,000. If you look at the average single-family residence in the United States that built, $84,000 of the cost is to comply with regulations.
Wow. Yeah.
So regulations are expensive,
yeah,
and I think that they're also stifling.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at right now the U.S. debt clock. This is usdebtclock.org. It's showing that the U.S. national debt right now is 19.9 trillion. So I'm imagining by probably next week we'll be at the 20 trillion mark, perhaps.
Well, it tends to bounce around, because it's hard to predict, because there's debt sometimes that is maturing, and tax receipts in the first few months of the year are relatively high. People are paying their whatever they owe IRS on their income tax. So it's a little hard to forecast because it's jittery at the beginning of the month. But yeah, look, the fact is this. If you look at the entire history of the Obama administration, we added just over $1.1 trillion per year to the national debt on average. And if you look at the national debt, approximately, I think it's 73% of the national debt has been occurred during the Obama and the Bush 2 administrations. So I don't think that this is something which is about Democrats or Republicans. I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has to do with sort of where we're going. And where we're going is further and further into debt. Exactly. And I think that the underlying cause there is that there isn't, that there is no motivation. There isn't sufficient motivation that politicians have to balance the debt. That nobody is going to run on a platform saying, "Hey, guess what? I balanced the budget, so vote for me." People don't care about that. People, the way I always put it is, people want 5 quarters for a dollar, and as long as voters are willing to accept that, then we're going to keep running up debt. So until such time as we say, you know what, we really need to balance the budget, or we're going to go into a hole that we're never going to get out of, then we can't expect politicians to sort of say, well, I'm going to vote against my own best interest and probably not get reelected because I think that balancing the budget is more important than my own reelection. Yeah. And I mean that literally. I'm not saying that to be glib or to be quippy. I think that that's literally what happens.
No, I completely agree. Many of these politicians it's just easier, and it's a better political move for them to offer a handout than to start cutting something in the budget. So I completely agree with you. The issue, though, I remember when Obama was first taking office, we were told that from what I remember, I think 16 trillion was the point of no return as far as the debt. I haven't heard anybody talking about that since. But do you believe that there is a point of no return? And if so, is it the 16 trillion mark, or have we not even passed it yet?
I think, and this is what you were referring to before, I think that one of the key numbers, and I've just developed this notion, not developed, but come to believe this notion, which is really put forth best by an economist named Lacey Hunt. Lacey has said that he believes that and he looks at various governments that have sort of stalled, and he says the key thing to look at with any economy is the debt to GDP ratio. And Lacey's conclusion is that when the debt to GDP ratio gets over 90%, that the Keynesian notion that if the government engages in deficit spending, it will stimulate the economy, goes completely backwards. That once the debt to GDP ratio exceeds 90%, that government spending becomes regressive. That as the government actually does more spending, which taken on in the form of debt, that actually GDP reverses. That has a negative multiplier once you get a debt to GDP ratio over 90%. And he does this by looking at the economies of various countries. Most notably Japan, which has a debt to GDP ratio, I think, of approximately 250%. In the United States, it's gone now to the one where I think it's approximately 106%. So I think that we should be concerned about that, and that probably more than anything, we have to come up with some way of really of balancing the budget.
Absolutely. So would you support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I think that most economists really think that it's a little severe, and they'd probably prefer something that gives a certain amount of discretion. But I think that if nothing else is going to work, then it might really be the best choice. And remember that I think it was only about 20 years ago, this came within one vote in the Senate of passing. I mean, we came very close to having a balanced budget amendment that passed both the House and the Senate about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But nobody's really talked about it that much lately.
Yeah. Well, I personally, I think that we are reaching the point of if we haven't already exceeded it, of a debt emergency. I think that something has to be done. We have to come up with ways to cut the budget. I mean, and not just in just one or two specific areas. I mean, I think every area needs to be reduced. So, do you think that the stimulus package that Donald Trump has been suggesting, I believe it's $1 trillion stimulus package, do you think that that's going to be successful at stimulating the economy, or if it's going to do more harm?
No, I mean, first of all, I don't think that's well defined. And if it's things like infrastructure spending, I think that this is notorious for taking a very long time to get going. So if it stimulates the economy, it won't stimulate the economy anytime soon. Anytime soon meaning, let's just say, in the next 2 years. The infrastructure is just notoriously slow, at being rolled out. Back when Obama was doing it, they were talking about shovel-ready projects. Well, I don't think there's that many shovel-ready projects anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the debt that I'm seeing here, this is, again, usdebtclock.org. Medicare, Medicaid consist of the largest amount of money I'm seeing here being spent and accounted for, then Social Security, and then defense. You got income security after that, net interest on debt, and federal pensions is the sixth level here. It seems to me that we are just spending ourselves into oblivion here. I just don't see how we can continue to promise handouts to people with money that we don't have.
I think that, look, first of all, I think that you're making a good point here, which is, if you look at where we'll be a few years from now, it's going to be the case that approximately 75% of the budget is spent on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on debt, which is to say there's not a lot of discretionary spending available. But I think that each of these things need to be looked at separately. And there was a great thing done a few years ago called Simpson-Bowles. There was a committee, and they came out with complete suggestions as to how to balance the budget. And they addressed Social Security, they addressed Medicare, they addressed other things. I think each of these things needs to be looked at separately. We need to come up with a solution that keeps Social Security solvent. I think we need to come up with a solution that keeps Medicare solvent. And I think that that's a lot more difficult, because it's a lot more difficult to predict what healthcare spending is going to be than it is what Social Security spending is going to be. The fix to Social Security is sort of obvious. We can do one of two things. We can either raise the ceiling on which people pay their Social Security tax, or we can basically raise the retirement age, or we can do a combination of the two. But I think that we should definitely do something so that Social Security is sustainable, because right now it's not. What happens with Social Security and Medicare is the money that goes into the trust funds, and there's separate trust funds for Social Security and Medicare, 98.5% of it has been loaned out to the Treasury Department and spent. In other words, it's gone. The Social Security and Medicare.
In other words, they stole the money that was promised.
Well,
that it would
let's not use the word stole. They borrowed it. Okay, they loaned it. The funds loaned it to Treasury. It's going to get repaid, but it's getting repaid from other tax dollars. So this isn't money that's being repaid from future Social Security and Medicare taxes. This is money that's being repaid with other taxes. And the present value, if we look at the long term, by long term I mean indefinite, more than 50 years out, and answer the question, how much money would need to be in those trust funds to fund these things the way that we've promised people? The answer is approximately $70 trillion. So in that sense, when you're saying, well, the national debt is $20 trillion, well, if you count Social Security and Medicare, the present value of the national debt, or the nominal national debt plus the obligation of Social Security and Medicare, is more like $90 trillion. And that's a lot of money.
Absolutely. Dick Lepre is a senior loan advisor from RPM Mortgage. He's been writing that newsletter. You guys can check that out on loanmind.org, right? Is that right?
Loanmind.com.
Oh, loanmind.com. There we go. And you can sign up for his newsletter. Dick, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. And would you be willing to do this again? I love picking your brain on this kind of stuff.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks, Dick. I really appreciate it.
Anytime you want, Mac.
And again, loanmind.com, loanmind.com. Thanks so much, Dick. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right, folks, we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be joined with Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant. We're going to talk about Trump, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the case of Mike Strickland. You guys might be familiar with Mike. He's the guy who's down in Portland. First of all, he's the guy who does Laughing at Liberals on YouTube. He's continually exposing what the left does and being attacked and assaulted for it continuously. He had his arm broken from an assault, and then he was down at this protest covering them, and these protesters started to attack him and assault him because they know who he is. They see him all the time, and they deal with him a lot. So he was attacked, drew his gun in self-defense, didn't fire it, gave himself enough space to basically get away from the situation, then reholstered his weapon, and he was arrested and charged with 21 or 22 different felonies. So Dan's going to give us an update on this. You guys don't want to miss what's coming up next.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
This is Dan Sandini of DaylightDisinfectant.com, citizen journalist, friend of the late Andrew Breitbart, and cohort of James O'Keefe. I listen to On the Move with Mac Worley because the only time he's wrong is when he disagrees with me.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Welcome to On the Move.
And we're back. Welcome to the second hour. I sure do appreciate you all sticking with us. At this point, we're going to be joined by Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant. That's DaylightDisinfectant.com. You can get him on Twitter at DaylightDis. You can also go to his website, DaylightDisinfectant.com. Hey, Dan, are you there?
I am. Thanks for having me on the program, Mac.
Oh, it's a pleasure as usual. So, first of all, I want to talk about this Mike Strickland case. But Actually, before we do that, how you been? It's been a while since we chatted.
I'm doing so well. I've relocated from Commie Central in downtown Portland. I'm now living in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida. Loving it. Beautiful day today. 73 degrees outside.
Oh wow!
Still doing undercover journalism and still exposing the left. Yeah, loving life, Mac.
Is there a big lefty scene out there in Florida?
You know, it's not like it was in downtown Portland, but definitely my apartment building sent out an email inviting people to go down to the Women's Day protest, which was, I guess, on the 21st of January, sort of the counter-protest to the Trump inauguration on the 20th, although they couldn't really figure out what they were protesting. But they definitely did. My apartment building did send out a note, and they definitely are active here in St. Pete, although it's nothing compared to downtown Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah,
so.
That's something else. And anybody who's, by the way, seen that video from Mike Strickland, the arrest video, and you've seen any of his other videos on Laughing at Liberals, you know how many essentially communists are down there. You can't swing a stick without hitting a commie down there. So, Dan, can you give us, and for all those out there who are unfamiliar with his story, can you talk about what happened to Mike in the events leading up to it, also his assault leading to his broken arm, and just kind of give us the backstory before we get into what happened?
Sure, happy to do so, and I'll be short. I will be short on details here. Like the exact dates and that sort of stuff, but I really do, and I was not at the trial. However, it's well covered by a very well-known talk show host in Portland, Victoria Taft. Yeah, so people should go to victoriataft.com and read the chronology of the trial over the last week and what happened. But I'll give the macro here. And so it was about a year ago, and Mike was down covering one of these Black Lives Matter protests, and they basically had pre-targeted him. It was a rally at which they wanted to incite violence. There's videos of them down at the square wanting to incite violence, and they targeted Mike. They said, let's go get that guy. And a group of them came at him. The leader. Go ahead.
So why? Just for the audience purposes here, why would they choose to target Mike? What about Mike made him a target?
Great. So Mike runs the YouTube channel Laughing at Liberals, which is a huge YouTube channel, millions and millions of views, and he's basically into exposing the left, and he's been doing that. You only have the leftist side of the story there since we showed up on the scene, and we both showed up at the scene at about the same time in Portland, about 2009. We were both Niners following the Obama inauguration, and he has exposed them time and time again, and he's also focused in on gun legislation. So, for example, during the last round of the gun legislation, they tried to make it an indefinite. I won't get into the details of the bill, but an indefinite. They were able to indefinitely hold your concealed carry license permit application in the state of Oregon. Well, when you were going to buy a gun, I guess, not the CCL, but when you're going to buy a gun, and they wanted to be able to indefinitely hold that. Well, Mike exposed that for what it was, which was a de facto ban on a lot of people getting their firearms when they needed them, and so we defeated that gun bill, and then many other gun bills before that. He has made a mockery of these people like they should be mocked. People like Ginny Burdick and Floyd Przansky. These are well-known politicians in the Portland area that Mike has made an enemy of simply by showing these people for who they are, and they have just been waiting for a chance to get even. They finally have gotten it. And getting back to the story at hand here. He was tailing along behind these guys and videoing them, and they were, hey, let's go get this guy, and they hit him with flagpoles, and they attacked him. A guy named Benjamin Carenza is the main witness in the thing, and he's a convicted felon multiple times over. I looked up his criminal record in California. He's impersonating an FBI officer, calling in bomb scares. This was the prime witness against Mike. And I think by any fair judging of the evidence that was presented, Mike was clearly threatened by these people. They pre-planned the attack on him. When they did attack him, he pulled a gun and pointed it in their direction, and they pretty much eased back. You can see in the video him walking away and talking to them, but until he was sure that he wasn't being threatened, he didn't put his gun away. And he did. His finger was never on the trigger. He backed away, and when the cops came to him, he gave himself up peacefully to them. And that night, they only charged him with a misdemeanor, and they released him on his own recognizance. And the next day, I brought him into the courthouse, and I was in the audience that day. I tried to film. They wouldn't let me film. They allowed two leftist media outlets to film, but I was not allowed to film. And two deputies came up to me and said, "Are you going to stop filming or are you not?" And they were ready to do the takedown. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll stop videoing." But why are these two people? And you have to have the judge's permission, Mac. So the only people that are allowed to film in the courtroom are with the judge's permission. And this is a Kit Topper appointed, or I guess it's a Kate Brown appointed judge that's there, and there's no way they're going to let the conservative media do it. In any case, so that on that day, the following day after they assaulted him, and he pulled his gun to protect himself, he didn't fire his weapon or anything like that. He just pointed it in their direction. This is what he was taught to do in his firearms course. They had at the trial, they had an expert firearms witness testify that he behaved properly in every way and in accordance with Oregon law, and they still convicted him. And So that following day after the assault on him, Mac, the district attorney called him a white supremacist. That's a total lie. And jacked the charges up to, I guess they had 7 victims. They were able to drum up 7 people that had been in the firing range of his weapon, who said they felt threatened by him. And so they charged him with, I guess, 3 different crimes. I'm probably getting it wrong, but again, Victoria will have it right. It is approximately the story here. Is 7 different people, 3 different felonies that they charged him with on that following day, and they set his bail at $250,000, Mac.
Wow.
$250,000. And just to give you a comparison on what that what that compares to, the head of the J20 protests was recently apprehended and just brought into custody on a misdemeanor. And while they were holding him, Mac, they discovered that he was wanted on basically child rape charges, and he's a repeat offender. And so they arrested him, charged him with multiple felonies and released him on $20,000 bail, if you can believe that. The clear threat to the community, right? To children, to raping children, okay? And his bail was set at 1/10 of what Mike's bail was set at. So it just gives you a comparison.
That's crazy.
And in any case, so they charged him, arrested him, they put him in jail. We got him out after 10 days, raised the bail, got him out after 10 days. And so this trial has been looming all the way through the holidays and up until February here when he went up in front of the jury last week. They did pick a jury, but they decided that it was not a fair jury. They couldn't find a fair jury. There were a bunch of anti-gun nuts in the jury. So they went with a judge trial, what they call a bench trial. And at the conclusion of the bench trial, which was on Friday, the judge, who was, as I said, a leftist judge, well-known leftist judge in the Portland area, found him guilty on 21 felonies with minimum mandatory sentences. So he's in bad shape right now. He's not in jail. He was released on the same conditions of his bail, so he's out until May when they're going to have sentencing for Mike Strickland. So
wow.
There's been talk of him appealing it, but that's where we're at. And I just want to make this final point that this is a political vendetta in an attempt to silence Mike Strickland. He's the only voice of the right in the media in Portland anymore. I'm gone. I'll walk that back a little bit. Leo Stratton is definitely starting to have an impact down here. He's the next person they target. They targeted me. They said, they'll target Mike, and this is an attempt. Mac, you've said many times. I think it was you that said that there is no First Amendment without a Second Amendment to protect it. And that's exactly what you're seeing right now in downtown Portland. So.
And if you're using the Second Amendment, you are risking putting yourself in jeopardy, like Mike was. But it's one of those things that many people who are gun activists or just want to have the right to defend themselves and at least the ability by carrying a firearm, you have to make that decision. Do you think that right now is is a time where you have to pull your gun for your safety, because the consequences of pulling that gun are real. All we have to do is look at what happened to Mike. If you pull your gun out because you're in fear of your life, even if you're completely justified, you could be facing 21 different felonies and, God knows how many different or how much time in prison. Which is why, first of all, and by the way, I'm not getting any money from these things, but there are places where you can get a insurance policy in case you have to use your gun lawfully for defensive purposes. Though they will insure you for any kind of legal bills that you might incur. But from what I understand, Mike probably doesn't have this, and he does need some money. So where can people go to donate to Mike's defense fund?
Okay, I pass on the link to you, Mac, and it's at the top of my timeline, public, and I'll just tell people on the line, it's a fairly complicated link, to just Google the Oregon Firearms Federation. That's OFF, Oregon Firearms Federation, and join the Oregon Firearms Federation. I think you get a free cap or whatever. Kevin Starrett is the head of the Oregon Firearms Federation. I don't think there's even a mandatory contribution in order to join, but as you join, there's a little comment section for as you fill out. If you say donate $50 or whatever, you can just say put this towards the Mike Strickland legal fund. So Kevin is collecting money. He has been collecting it for him. He's a great guy. Oregon Firearms Federation, a fabulous organization, and he's been doing that since the very beginning. And there's something you mentioned, Mac, that I do want to throw in there is that, so folks go to the Oregon Firearms Federation, and throw Mike a little goodwill on, these legal bills are mounting up at this point. And Mike was assaulted a year before this thing by a guy named Sky Fitzgerald. The same group of people, without getting into details of it, the same group of Bloomberg-paid lackeys in Oregon jumped Mike and broke his arm in 3 places a year ago. So this guy, it's not like Mike just, pulled his gun and started waving at these people. These are people who assaulted him previously. He was seriously injured. I talked to the surgeon afterwards. Worst break he's ever seen. And, they tried to do it to him again. He said, I wasn't going to let it happen to me again. Pulled his gun to defend himself, pointed it in their direction until the threat was gone, put it back. And now he's been convicted of 21 felonies. So this could happen to you. And if it could happen in Multnomah County, it can happen anywhere in the United States of America, folks. So if you just say, hey, this doesn't apply to me, and hey, this is just some whack job out in Oregon or something like that, I got news for you. It's not. This is a concerted effort by the left to use the legal system to silence the First Amendment. So we're only gonna have one viewpoint in this country. Apparently, we're only gonna be the viewpoint of the left because they own the media.
I mean, it's unbelievable to me that when you paint it the story how it really is. Mike goes down to film. He's peaceful in the process. He's not hurting anyone. He's just rolling film, and they don't like him rolling film. So in an effort to silence them, they begin to intimidate and assault him. And then because he's afraid for his life, which he has justification because they literally broke his arm a year before, he draws his gun, backs away, holsters his gun again, and gets out of the situation. And then he's arrested. Now they're trying to silence and intimidate him in the streets. These lefty protesters. But then the justice system itself scoops him up, and because it's ran by a bunch of lefties down there in Portland, you've got them intimidating and trying to silence him as well. So it's just unbelievable. I have the utmost respect for Mike, and I really do hope that he can appeal this. This is, for me, my personal experience in court. For those of you who may know, I was unlawfully arrested as well. I lost my first trial. This kind of stuff happens. Typically, you do a lot better in appeal, especially in these kind of liberal areas, than you do in the original trial. So hope is not lost. Mike can still win this, and I think that if he appeals, he will. I personally, as soon as I get off the air with you, I'm going to go donate to his legal fund. And FYI, everybody, if you would like to do the same, check out @OnTheMoveShow on Twitter. That's my tweet that I just sent out. It says send what you can to Oregon Firearms Oregon's Firearms Educational Foundation for Michael Strickland Legal Fund in the tribute box. That's a tweet I just sent out. It's also on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. It's one of my last tweets. I think I sent it 9 minutes ago. So please feel free to donate to him if you would like. So, Dan, any final thoughts about the situation here before we move on to another topic?
Yeah. I would just say, Peter Breitbart would have wanted you to do it. I mean, Mike is a Breitbart 09er, and he's just been down there exposing the left, and his voice is going to be gone. And especially if you live in Oregon right now, you're going to have nobody protecting you against the gun bills this time. Mike has been doing it for you. People underestimate the effect Mike has had on these people, and he's going to be gone. So, folks, donate to his legal fund, and hopefully we'll be able to get it overturned on appeal. I appreciate your good words there, Mac, and saying that yours was overturned on appeal. Maybe Mike's will be as well.
I mean, we can hope. I mean, justice has to prevail here, but in order to do that, these things cost a lot of money. I'm speaking from personal experience. These things cost a lot of money. So please donate to his foundation, or to the Oregon Firearms Educational Foundation, again, indicating that you would like this money to go to Mike Strickland's legal fund. Do you mind sticking with us to a break, Dan? Do you got some time?
Yeah, I'll hang right on here, Mac.
Okay, great. We're going to cut to a commercial break, gang. When we come back, I want to talk more with Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant. Check him out, daylightdisinfectant.com. I want to talk about Trump. I want to talk about the travel ban and a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on in the Trump administration. I want to get Dan's take on this because we haven't talked in a little while on the air. So anyway, we'll be right back after this break. You don't want to miss what's coming up next.
Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign. Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. Thanks for sticking with us to the break. So at this point, we have Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant on the line. Dan, are you there?
I am.
Okay. All right. So I just want to ask here. Let's go with transparency here for all who are listening. If you're not familiar, I have been skeptical during the campaign of Donald Trump, to say the least. During his election and the inauguration and everything, I've said that we ought to give him a chance. But just to give you that backstory, I'm not necessarily a Donald Trump supporter. Dan, on the other hand, is. Am I correct in that, right, Dan?
Yes, I love Donald Trump.
Okay, there we go. So
love would not be too strong a word.
Okay, so your opinion of his first few weeks here as president, what would you rate him on a grade scale?
I'd be. I mean, there's always room for improvement. I'd give him a 9. 9 out of 10. I would rate him.
Okay, all right.
8.
8. Well, what are some of the areas where you think that he has some room for improvement, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I mean, one of the big things he ran on was, repealing Obamacare. We haven't really seen any action on that. I mean, he has signed some legislation, some executive orders about Obamacare, but in general, he's been unable to bring people together to say, hey, these are the problems, and we have to fix it. So nothing's been done. Nothing really has been done on Obamacare since he's been there. And also, he's promised to do some tax reform where he's going to lower the taxes on businesses to stimulate the economy, and haven't really seen any action there yet. So, he's got a long way to go. He's just getting started in the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's an article, foxbusiness.com, since we're talking about this. Trump extends timetable to replace Obamacare. This article was dated February 6, 2017. Let me just read the first little bit here just so we can hear some of the meat of this article here. President Donald Trump downgraded expectations for his party's swift repeal and replacement of the 2010 health law in a Sunday interview with Fox News' Bill O'Reilly, saying maybe it'll take till some time into the next year. Obamacare doesn't work, so we are putting in a wonderful plan. It's statutorily takes a while to get. We're going to be putting it in fairly soon, Mr. Trump said. I think that, yes, I would like to say by the end of the year, at least the rudiments, but we should have something within this year and the following year. So do you think that, as a Trump supporter, do you think that that's acceptable, that within a year or the following year? Or is he kicking the can down the road?
I honestly, let's just back up a little bit. I have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, really, we know that we've made a move in the wrong direction. Okay, getting government further involved in the healthcare industry is not going to fix the problems of the healthcare industry, right? And so it depends what it looks like. Whether we think that that's a realistic expectation. To me, why wouldn't you just put it on a timetable and repeal the existing bill? Because basically, if you look at what Obamacare is, you can't read the bill. That's why you said people, hey, read the bill, read the bill. It's almost impossible to read it, because what it is it goes back through the existing law and code that's out there and says, hey, go to this paragraph of the HIPAA laws and change this to this, change this paragraph to this, and this paragraph to this. And so if you repeal that, you'd go back to what we had before Obamacare, which is tax breaks for businesses, okay, who wish to wish to apply the benefits in the tax code to giving their employees health care insurance. So, like when I was working full time, my company was absorbing 70% of the cost because they could deduct, this 70% that they were paying towards it. So it was better than giving me the money was to actually pay for part of my health care. It was a benefit to everybody. Well, they repealed that part of the law. So now companies, don't get that benefit of doing that. And likewise in the tax, it adds to the tax code and says, hey, if you don't have a policy that we approve of, you've got to pay this fine every year. Okay, so to me, I would simply repeal what's out there on a timeline. Okay, for the people who have policies on the exchange right now, you can't throw them out in the street, but you have to wind it back to where we were before this draconian law was put into place, where you've got to. I don't even want to get into the problems with Obamacare, but I guess you said is a year enough time? Yeah, to just repeal the existing law, and I really think that's what needs to be done on a timetable. They need to figure out which paragraphs they're going to repeal and when, and allow people to transition from this exchange, and then shut this exchange down, because it's a mess. It's a god-awful mess.
I completely agree. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on your response, do you not support the repeal and replace? You just want to repeal?
Well, I would say repeal plus, in my opinion, and here are the pluses that I would add to it. But even going back to what we had before would be better than what we had now, in my opinion. We'd be better off than we're now. But the things that I would change are, the Yeah, Matt, the big change that I would make is to allow people to buy products from across state lines, so that if a person just wanted, and reducing the amount of legislation which restricts the kind of product the person can buy.
Agreed.
So, for example, in Oregon, outlawed were these catastrophic policies. You could not buy a catastrophic policy in Oregon and then go to Zoom Care or whatever to get your shots every year or whatever it is you're doing, okay? So that was impossible in the state of Oregon. If you simply changed that one thing and allowed people to, and deregulated the industry, you'd see huge cost savings and huge benefits to people that were out there. I was going to say, reinstate the policy that you cannot be denied because of a previously existing condition. But the reality of that, Mac, was that there was no state that could have health insurance sold that did not provide for those people. That's one of the biggest lies that got Obamacare in there, is that if you had a previously existing condition, you could not get health insurance. Every one of the states had to provide a mechanism for doing that under the HIPAA laws. So it was put in under Senator Kennedy when the HIPAA laws went through. So even if you repealed it all, you'd still have to go back to where we were before, which is that people with previously existing conditions could get health insurance. But that's one of the big lies. But I would say opening up the markets back so that you could sell different policy products across state lines would be a great step in the right direction.
Oh yes, I do agree with that 100%. One of the questions I have though is this whole repeal and replace situation. Because first of all, I don't believe that we should be replacing anything. I think we should be repealing the law in its entirety and limiting the amount of regulation that we even have within our healthcare sector. I completely agree with getting rid of the regulations concerning state lines, how we arbitrarily are not allowed to purchase a product in another state for healthcare. That to me seems like all it does is limit competition. And let me ask you, Dan, what is the justification? What justification can they possibly have that says you in Florida can't go buy insurance in Ohio? What's the argument for that?
Well, the lefties, I think, would argue, and I should know how to put this argument together, but it's so insane that my mind has difficulty moving in those directions. But I believe under the Constitution that the federal government has the right to regulate interstate commerce. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And so they feel that they can step into that process to make sure things are fair.
Well, that's not just regulation, though. I mean, that's complete and outright stopping the commerce from happening. They're completely denying the commerce from taking place in the first place. It's not just regulating. It's ending commerce. I don't think it says anything in the Constitution that says the federal government can just stop all commerce between states.
Just close the roads. That's essentially what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Let's just close the roads. Or don't allow trucks. Don't allow these trucks shipping this particular product to come through the state. I mean, it's insane. But the Constitution.
So who's the victim, though? I just want to understand the justification from the left, because I'm imagining this is. I don't even know the history around why we started putting these boundaries up on states and stop people from. Oh, looks like we lost Dan on the call. He'll probably be calling back in a second. But to you guys out there, MacPack, what is the justification? Who's the victim? Who's being harmed by somebody purchasing a product across state lines? I do not know this argument, and it just seems to me very silly that we have these artificial boundaries. Who decided that we needed the government to protect us from evil insurance companies across state lines? When again, the reason why our healthcare is so freaking expensive is because, well, it looks like Dan's calling it back. Hey, Dan, you there?
I am. Sorry, got a drop call there.
Oh, no worries. I was just in the middle of the rant here. So the reason why we have such high, or at least one of the reasons why we have such high insurance costs is, number one, the government's involved, and number two, there's not a whole lot of competition. Obamacare caused premiums to double and triple throughout this process. But now, many places, including the areas that I live in, only have one or two choices between insurance providers because the markets have essentially dried up because these companies are going into the red. It's costing them far too much money to operate in these areas. So you have essentially monopolies that are established, which there's no competition, and that lack of competition causes the prices to rise because there's no one to compete with. It's a natural process. If you open up the borders, if you allow, and I'm not talking about open border society, I'm talking about free trade. If you allow free trade from somebody in Florida, like yourself, Dan, who wants to purchase Ohio insurance, it opens up the market to all of these competitors and all of these different insurance providers, and that competition will naturally decrease the price. I still just can't fathom the reason why someone would want to deny people the right to purchase something across state lines. I don't know what that justification is.
Ultimately, I mean, the reality is they can justify it any way they want to, but the idea of the left is to control people, okay? This is a power thing for these folks. And basically, if you control the healthcare system, what is it, a third of the economy or something like that? It invades every element of our life. Yeah, fifth economy, excuse me. And so, these people are out to control people's lives, and I hate to say it, but that's really the case. And let's laser in on something, Mac. Let's laser in on who wins and who loses under Obamacare. Okay, and the people who really win is anybody who's making, say, around $20 grand or something like that a year. Okay, because they've got the biggest subsidy. So, in the way they structure the subsidy, according to Justice Roberts, is it's an unearned income tax credit. So basically, you get the money even if you don't make money. Do you follow what I'm saying? So you get that subsidy regardless of whether you owed any tax or not for that particular year. The money is coming, so you get this $400, $500 kicker every month if you're low income. In the old days, those guys were forced to, and I honestly believe this is the way to go, that these people were forced onto things like Medicaid and that kind of stuff. And I know you would argue that they should eliminate even Medicaid and allow charitable organizations to pick this up. I think that's you can't let people die on the hospital steps. I have to agree with that judges
that's not Medicaid.
Right. I think
that there's already a law that hospitals can't turn them away. So that's not Medicaid, though.
Okay, so who picks up the tab, I guess, is the bottom line on that. If it's a private institution or whether the government picks it up or whoever does that. But I think there should be some sort of bare bones, you're not going to die immediately sort of stuff. Is it a gold plan like these people can get now? No, it's not. And that's the way it should be because it incentivizes you to work. Right, you earn enough money so that you can buy better medical care and you'll live longer. Then it's sort of Darwinism at work in the society. And now the incentive is to sit down. And that it boggles my mind that the federal government at every turn just incentivizes people to just sit down. If you start working and making more money, you lose your subsidy. I mean, it's just insane what's going on right now. In the old days, people couldn't. In the old days, I sound like a really old man, but before the days of Obamacare, you really hedged your bets about retiring early because there was fear of being able to get health insurance. If you're working, you get it through your employer, and they don't deny you on the basis of they negotiate those policies, and you're not denied on the basis of a previously existing condition. And now, the incentive is that if I do start working, I'm going to earn more money. Okay, so I'll lose my subsidy, so I'm not going to work. So all across the society, you see this non-productivity incentive, and I just think it's very bad for American society as a whole.
That was an excellent point. Actually, it does seem like there was an inversion on that that aspect of people working. People were afraid to stop working because they were afraid they're going to lose their insurance. Now they're afraid to work as a result of Obamacare. Isn't that fascinating? So.
Yep.
I'm curious.
That's 100% true.
Do you? Because you said that you essentially you believe that there should be some form of social safety net, making sure that people don't die on the hospital steps. My question to you: do you believe that healthcare is a right? That you have a right to healthcare?
No.
Okay. So what's your justification if you believe there should be a social safety net, which is a requirement of, like it requires redistribution of wealth, subsidies, taking money from one party and giving it to another, or at a very minimum forcing the healthcare workers to provide a service for you at no cost, or at a cost that will later be reimbursed with taxpayer money, or a tax cut. What's the justification for these social safety nets if you don't believe that healthcare is a right?
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it. I mean, I think in a perfect idealistic, non-socialistic, capitalistic world, you would not provide that safety net. But I think you have to think about it this way, Matt, is that if you're down and out on your luck, there should not be this, hey, I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die now mentality to the whole thing. That there's no hope, and that I can't get a little help to get myself on my feet again if you happen to be thrown out in the streets by your employer going away, for example, or something like that. So in my opinion, a small, very thin social safety net allows people to get caught so that they have time to go look for another job, for example, to get real health insurance and that kind of thing. It shouldn't be a permanent thing, but there should be something there to help carry people through when they're, through no fault of their own, are thrown out on the streets or put on bad times. But that's just my opinion on it. That people who, are so down and out on their luck that they're in total despair that they give up, and I don't think that's a very productive thing for society. And so I would say a small social safety net is something that's desirable for people, and I would argue that even in terms of help for food stamps and that kind of stuff. And I know that you'd be an advocate of just allowing soup kitchens and that kind of stuff from private religious organizations for helping those people out. But I do think that there should be a small amount for short periods of time only. It's allowed for people to buy basic necessities to keep themselves alive. And how about children? You think about children, right, Mac? What falls into them if a child is born into poverty, and his parent has been irresponsible, okay? Why should that child die in the streets? I sort of agree with that philosophy, that those kids should be kept alive until they can make decisions on their own and become productive members of society. And I think the rest of the world sort of judges American society based on that. There should be a very thin social safety net. But it's not right by any means. It's something we choose to do as a society.
Well, we're not really choosing. I mean, I don't have a choice. My taxes are being taken, and I don't have a choice of that. If I try not to pay, guys with guns will come kick at my door and take me away. There's really no choice in that. My issue here is not because, again, one of the things that we typically hear when it comes to this conversation is the children, as you said. I completely agree that people ought to be taken care of that are less fortunate. Where I disagree is who ought to be taking care of those people, because I don't think it is the government's responsibility. The government doesn't have a positive right to provide these services at the cost of other taxpayers. This is our right, this is our responsibility as individuals. If I see somebody starving in my society, it's my job to take care of that person, give them a hand up instead of a hand out. Whereas I think what the government does is them taking over that responsibility, first of all, makes us feel like we're less responsible for the people around us. I'm not a socialist in any way saying that we have a responsibility, a legal responsibility for each other, but I think we have a moral responsibility for our fellow man. And I think that if the government wasn't doing this job, first of all, people would feel more responsible for their neighbors, and more importantly, I think more people would give. Not that we're not giving enough already. We are already the most charitable country in the world. And let me just point out a quote here from Benjamin Franklin that I think really goes well with this conversation here. Benjamin Franklin said, "I am for doing good to the poor, but I think the best way of doing good to the poor is not making them easy in poverty, but leading them or driving them out of it. I observed that the more public provisions more public provisions were made for the poor, the less they provided for themselves, and of course become poorer. And on the contrary, the less was done for them, the more they did for themselves and became richer. What do you think about that?
I agree with Benjamin Franklin. So I think that you would dial it back to zero. I think. I'm not sure if Benjamin Franklin would, but you would dial it back to zero. And, you know, there was a huge fight when the Constitution was written. Was it 1787? Is that the Constitution? Am I right? I think 1787.
I think it was 1789.
Excuse me, 1789. Oh, my God. 1789. The health and welfare clause in the Constitution, I think is what they justify this stuff under. You know, but I'm not a constitutional expert.
Disregard. I apologize. You were right. I'm looking at history.com. U.S. Constitution signed September 17th, 1787. You were right. I apologize.
Yep, September 17th. I will never forget that day. September 17th. Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. No, that's fine. I can't believe I got a history day correct. It's a miracle. No, it's a miracle. Honestly, it's just like, you know what? Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and that's exactly what that number. It just. I know it's September 17th, but I guess 1780. I guess 1787. Is that right?
Yeah,
I think
you're
that's
right.
right.
1787.
Yeah, that's right. 11 years after it took them that long, Mac, to get it together. After the revolution, you know, It's just crazy. But they finally, there was all kinds of disagreement about it. But you're absolutely right. You know, the Constitution, it totally restricts what the government can and cannot do, right? I mean, it just says these are the only things it can do. Anything that lies outside of that, well, you know, TS. I guess I can say tough shit on your show. I'm going to TS. Well, you know, and they've just taken this little loophole. It's basically a loophole, which is the health and welfare clause, and just expanded it until, you know, now you've got, you know, it comes down to, you know, James O'Keefe exposing these Obama phones, you know, where you can get down there and buy multiple Obama phones and sell them if you want to. You know, it's just crazy that you get a phone, you get food stamps, you get your subsidized housing. The subsidized housing people in Portland lived better than I did when I was there, and that's clearly all out of control. You know, I mean, it's got to be dialed back. And, you know, do you dial it back to zero? I don't know. What did America look like before? And when did we do this? When did we start providing for Medicaid? When did that happen in the government? You have to look at the history of healthcare in the United States. I don't know. And we're better off now than we were before that. But we were then. I honestly don't know.
So to answer your question, Medicare and Medicaid is overseen by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services of the Department of HHS. Both were created when the President Lyndon B. Johnson signed amendments to the Social Security Act on July 30th, 1965. So we had these forever before. I mean, most people were alive. There's a lot of people alive when this was signed back then, and you know, here's a crazy part. You were talking about the General Welfare Clause. That's Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which it says that Congress basically has the power to lay taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay debts and to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. That does not mean that generally everyone should be on welfare. It means that the things that the government does should be generally beneficial to everyone in the United States. General welfare. It doesn't mean that they should be selectively picking groups to give handouts to. And again, I think that when they do that, first of all, they make people easy in poverty, and second of all, they disincentivize people to go out and make their situation better. And thirdly, and what I think is the most critical here that we should be talking about, is it takes away our responsibility to each other. We're handing over the reins of this to the federal government or local state government, doesn't matter who, when this is our responsibility. If you don't get any special credit, because I mean, do you feel like you're donating to charity every time that you pay your taxes, Dan? I certainly don't. I feel like I'm being fleeced. I feel like the government has me shaking upside down, and they're seeing what falls out of my pockets. So
I'm going to say that, you know, I definitely, since Obama, I've ratcheted back on my charitable giving, because in my mind, the government's taking over that role. So why should I be? I'm not going to pay twice. Well, I'm going to pay for some charity to do it when the government's doing it, I guess. And that's probably that. But I think that if you looked at it statistically, I could come up with a number of studies that show that as taxes increase, people give less to charities. So, it's a...
If you have less to give, if you have less to give, what are you going to give? Especially with the way the economy is now. But on top of that, people are now turning to the government to fill that role when this is supposed to be an individual responsibility for us all. You can choose whether or not you want to do it, but we all have a responsibility to each other. And I don't want to see anyone dying on the steps of the hospital, and if I did, I would do something about it. But I certainly don't think that some government thug should come in and take my money to pay for that person dying on the steps of the hospital. That's something that we as a society should make sure never happens by choice. By choosing to do this to help each other, because that's really doing stuff for others. That's the only thing worth doing in this world in the first place. So when we hand that over to the government, first of all, the government's going to do it worse, less efficient, and in process, we're probably going to lose a whole bunch of money to the sticky fingers of congressmen and all of their cronies in the process. So I don't think that this is something that's going to help us in the long run. In fact, I think it changes us as a society. We're now handing this responsibility over to the government. And again, the government, there's no such thing as a moral government. Government in general, by the way, is responsible for more deaths in the last century than any natural force on Earth. So let's not hand them over this great moral responsibility we have to each other. This is something that I think we should keep for ourselves. And Dan, I will say, I am absolutely 100% ideologically opposed to redistribution of wealth. The only thing that I think that we should be using taxes for is very limited purposes outlined in the Constitution. We should not be giving one group or one special party or something money from other people. I firmly disagree with that.
And the Obamacare subsidy is the most egregious example of that, Mac. Even if you look at it from before, when Obamacare came in. Before Obamacare came in, if you paid a health insurance premium, you could deduct it from your taxes. There were huge tax reductions. Now, what they did when Obamacare came under is they eliminated those deductions, and then they turned it into this unearned income tax credit. So it's the exact opposite. They flipped it around so that you're de-incentivized from working. Formerly, if you had gone out and found a $50,000 to $100,000 job, when you paid your premium, you could deduct your returns. Now you lose if you find that $50,000 to $100,000 job, you lose your credit. That's basically what happens, and that's given to somebody who's less fortunate than you, Mac. So that's how that's working now, or not working is I guess what it is. It's not working. It's not how it's working. It's not working. And you can see these people screaming bloody murder right now, and that's the reason why you can't give people a bunch of free shit and then just say, hey, guess what? You're not going to get any more free shit. People aren't going to go quietly when you try and reach into their pockets. So that's basically what's going on right now. You've got a bunch of rabble in the streets that are teed off because they're going to lose their stuff. And but we're not going to give up. We're going to restore the freedom of the American people, which is basically getting the government out of our lives. Any step to get the government out of our lives is a good one, which is why I say repeal Obamacare. Let's start from there. Let's go forward.
Yeah, well, I would definitely agree with the repeal. I'm not for replacing. And let me ask you, Dan. There's, 4 components here that I'm just curious where you stand on in terms of if Trump does this kind of stuff. So let me ask you, are you opposed or for a mandate requiring people to have health insurance?
Ooh, that's a toughie. Opposed.
Okay, me too. I'm completely opposed to forcing people to buy a product. I think that's immoral, and I don't think the government has a right to do it. What about the forcing insurance companies to cover people who have pre-existing conditions? Are you for that, or do you oppose that?
I oppose that. There's a different way of ensuring that people have the ability to buy health insurance, so I oppose it. There's another way of doing it. Okay. I think the high-risk pools are the way of doing that. We can get into the details of how that was done beforehand, but it's up to the states to decide. So you're on a 10th Amendment thing. It allows them to invent ways of getting coverage for these people.
Exactly. And obviously, in addition to a government option, there are things that we as individuals can do. If we know there's an epidemic of the country here where people are being dropped by their insurance providers and things like that, we could be charitable and fill that gap. Secondly,
there already are those charitable. I forget what you call them, but there are charities where people pool their money, et cetera, to do that. And I know I have relatives that have done it, and it's worked. So, in any case, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so the next one. What about the forcing insurance companies to keep kids on a parent's policy until age 26?
Opposed. I'm with you.
Okay, all right. And lastly, subsidies, redistribution of wealth, taking money from one person and giving it to another.
Now, until you can eliminate the taxes, I would incentivize it through tax deductions because helping people are better. And a tax deduction basically functions like eliminating the tax entirely. But until you can do that, roll it back to where it was. Change the unearned income tax credit, which that's what Roberts basically said was it's a tax. He's right. It's a reverse tax. And there's nothing more unfair than an unearned income tax credit. It totally turns a society upside down. So opposed.
Okay.
Opposed.
All right. Yeah, and I agree with you on all of that. So, just so you know, I have a long memory, Dan. And when we talk again after this repeal and replace effort, I'm going to be talking to you about this, and we'll see what you rate Donald Trump then. And I hope that you remain consistent with this. I'm looking forward to having these conversations. And first of all, I just want to point out I have the utmost respect for Dan. Everybody, Dan is not even just because he's a good friend of mine, but because of he has a smart head on his shoulders. Dan is very brave too, man. I have a lot of respect for you from what you've done down in Portland, the conflicts that you've been in, and I think you've handled very well. And just the balls that you got to go down there and put yourself at risk from these people, as we can see from Mike's case. These guys are completely willing to assault you, to spit on you, to hit you with flagpoles, which that's not a light thing to do. You've been cracked in the head with a flagpole, right?
Yes, I haven't cracked it. Cracked in the head is a little bit of exaggeration, but I've been hit in the head deliberately with the flagpole before. Bopped would be a little bit better word for it, but yeah, definitely happened to me on May Day, maybe 2-3 years ago. So it's happening. Mac, I'll turn that back around on you. You've been down there with me in Portland, so you're just brave as I am on May Day. I mean, it's Commie Christmas.
People don't know who I am down there, though. You got a target on your back when you're down there. Nobody knows me unless I'm standing next to you, which we have that picture of down there. But yeah, I'm not a target like you guys were, man. Everybody down there knew you guys because you and Mike were consistently down there exposing what they're doing. I go down there an odd time or two for a May Day, but it's a little different my experience than yours because I can slip in and out of the crowd and nobody think twice about it. But like I said, the utmost respect for you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you say about what Trump does here with these Obamacare repeal and replace. And I hope that he gets rid of the mandate, the pre-existing condition, and the age 26 requirement, as well as subsidies. If he does that, I will say that Donald Trump did a good job on that. If he doesn't, I'll be critical, as I hope you would be too. So let's move on to another topic real fast here. And before we do that, I have a Twitter response here. This is from @NYTFury. Said, thank you, Mac, for having at Daylight this on to discuss #free Mike Strickland and for spreading the word. So looks like people are happy about that, and thanks so much for retweeting this to your followers as well, so more people can. He retweeted the link there to the donation page. Again, you guys can all check that out at facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow or @OnTheMoveShow on Twitter. And I'm just curious here. There's a story, Dan, I wanted to talk with you about. There is rumor now, and I don't know how accurate this is, folks, so don't yell at me if because the sources might check out. I'm fully disclosing.
Well, they're going to yell at you anyway.
Yeah, this could be fake news. This very well could be fake news. I don't know, but you all need to decide this for yourself. All right, so don't take it at face value. But this is an article on Vox.com. It's titled "Trump paused a call with Putin to make an aide explain a nuclear arms treaty." And he was basically on the phone with Donald Trump, or Donald Trump's on the phone with Putin, and Trump then told Putin that he needed to pause the call for a second, and he was explained when Putin raised the possibility of extending the 2010 treaty known as New START, Trump paused to ask his aide in an aside what the treaty was. The Reuters reported Jonathan Landy and David Rode wrote, Trump then told Putin the treaty was one of several bad deals negotiated by the Obama administration, saying that the New Deal favored Russia. Trump also talked about his own popularity on the phone call. And first of all, I'm just curious, is it important that Donald Trump knows every aspect of these kind of important treaties as far as New START and maybe like the Open Skies Treaty? Are you familiar with that one, Dan?
Who the hell can know, right? Who can know all the details of those things?
It's good.
I'm not sure whether you're going to pause the call for it, but you can't. The number of details that are involved in these things, you can't. That's he's a new president too, so it's going to take him a while to get spun up on a mess that's been left behind after the last 8 years. So I'm not surprised. Not surprised in the slightest.
Oh, actually, Dan, we have a comment in the chat room. Joseph asks, "What is May Day?" I would love to hand that over to you. I consider you the resident expert.
Once a year, basically, it's a leftist. It's organized by labor, basically, and it is a holiday. And isn't it? I believe in socialist countries, it's sort of celebrated like our Labor Day, okay? And basically in Portland, it's an excuse for every leftist cause, whoever wrote that comment, that you could possibly imagine. The anarchists, the International Socialist Organization, the USA Communists, they all march in Portland together.
Socialists, Black Lives Matter, illegal immigrants.
Yep. They have huge parades. Usually it terminates with the anarchists going on a rampage and breaking windows and that kind of stuff. Illegal aliens. That's another huge cause that's down there. You'll see more Mexican flags than American flags. And so it's a great opportunity in your particular city, whoever the listener is, to just go down there with your video camera and just roll tape. You'll hear some very egregious things in there. And, YouTube them. You'll get a bunch of views on it. But, yeah, we call it Commie Christmas in Portland. May Day comes once a year. In any case, there you go.
It's May 5th, everyone, May 5th. Feel free to charge your video cameras and charge down to your local city downtown. There's probably going to be a May Day protest. I remember seeing these before I actually knew what they were. And,
you're right. May 5th is May Day, not May 1st. You're correct.
Yeah. So the report. Sorry, we kind of skipped around here. The report here with Donald Trump saying that he interrupted the phone call with Vladimir Putin to ask a basic question about U.S.-Russian relations in regards to these treaties. Is it important, in your opinion here, that the President of the United States know some details of the New START agreement? And by the way, are you familiar with New START and Open Skies, those two agreements that we have?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So I tell you what. Let's go ahead and cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I'll go over some of these agreements here that we have with Russia. And would you mind holding through the break, Dan?
Sure.
Okay. All right. We'll be right back after this, folks. Don't go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bear Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashawurley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. Welcome to the third hour. This is the Overdrive Hour. This is what we talk about, all the stuff we didn't get a chance to get to in the first 2 hours of the show. So we're on the line with Dan Sandini. Hey, Dan, you still there?
I am still here. I'm reading about the New START Treaty.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the New START Treaty is a continuation of the START Treaty, which START, S-T-A-R-T, stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. This is a treaty that was essentially intended to limit the amount of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that could be had by each nation, Russia and the United States. This limits, the aggregate limits here, we have limits of 700 deployed intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, deployed submarines, launched ballistic missiles, those are SLBMs, and deployed heavy bombers equipped for nuclear armaments. They limit them to 1,550 nuclear warheads on ICBMs, deployed SLBMs, and deployed heavy bombers equipped for nuclear armaments. Each such heavy bomber is counted as one warhead toward this limit. 800 deployed and non-deployed ICBM launchers, SLBM launchers, and heavy bombers equipped for nuclear armament. Okay, so essentially this is just a reduction treaty for nuclear weapons. I mean, 1,550 nuclear warheads is still enough to destroy the planet numerous times, but I digress. It's still a step in the right direction. Donald Trump has said that this is a bad deal. And one of the reasons why he said it was a bad deal is because it didn't limit Russia from creating nuclear weapons, but it did us. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is both Russia and the United States are limited to 1,550 nuclear weapons. However, there's a possibility that Russia, as usual, cheats, because that's kind of what Russia does. So I'm not sure if that's what he was specifically talking about, but the treaty itself does limit us both equally. I think that Donald Trump's really his main beef with the New START Treaty is more than likely because it was a Barack Obama negotiated deal, and he thinks that he's the best negotiator, and he could probably get a better deal than whatever Obama got us. But I do think that this is actually not a bad deal. I am in favor of the New START Treaty. It's two countries, two sovereign nations, voluntarily agreeing to this agreement as well. By the way, the other treaty that I would like to talk about, it's the Open Skies Treaty. It's a treaty on open skies which establishes a regime of unarmed aerial observation flights over the territories of its signatories. The treaty is designed to enhance mutual understanding and confidence by giving all participants, regardless of size, a direct role in gathering information through aerial imaging on military forces and activities of concern to them. Open Skies is one of the most wide-ranging international arms control efforts to date to promote openness and transparency in military forces and activities. So this is another operation, another treaty, that I'm in favor of, because it basically is a de-escalating force. I think when people, especially in terms of the Cold War era, when we are able to put limits on each other that we both mutually agree on and allow transparency where they can come in and check us and we can come in and check them. And the Open Skies agreement, by the way, is also good. I think this reduces the amount of distrust in this area towards one another. Dan, first of all, what's your opinion of these treaties, just based on the information that you've gotten?
Yeah, in general, nuclear arms reduction treaties are good news, but they have to be, fair and applied equally to both sides.
Exactly, and I don't necessarily trust Russia. Let's be clear about that. I have a healthy distrust of Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation, but I do think that this overall is a good deal. I don't think that Donald Trump is correct in saying that it's not a good deal. I don't necessarily know what his gripe is specifically, because all he said was that it limited us but not Russia, which is actually not the truth, unless he was referring to Russia cheating, which I don't know if we have any evidence to suggest that Russia has more nuclear warheads than the 1550 that they're allowed to have. But more accurately here, and more importantly, I think that I would like to talk about is the fact that Trump was about to have a conversation with Putin, and he wasn't prepared with this information. So I look at this as not necessarily a failure on Donald Trump himself, but a failure on his team. They are essentially setting him up for failure. You're about to have a conversation with Vladimir Putin, president of the Russian Federation, and you don't have all the information you need to carry on this conversation. Do you think that this is a failure on the team, or is this just something that we should just overlook and say it's no big deal? I mean, he doesn't need to know everything, right?
My guess is, without knowing the facts of the matter, is that probably this is being exaggerated by the leftist media. The administration has been plagued with leaks. And probably somewhere high level in the Trump administration, somebody leaked this to the left media, and they're exaggerating it. Now, how does Trump look at this treaty? Okay, it's well known that Putin has wanted to extend this treaty. Okay, so Trump, from the position of a negotiator, is automatically going to be opposed to it to begin with. That's sort of a bargaining chip that's in his hand. Yeah, that's if you really want it this bad, there's got to be something wrong here, and I suspect that he suspects that they're cheating. Whether there's any validity to those fears and accusations, I don't know. I don't know enough about nuclear arms treaties. As a matter of fact, you could probably fit what I know about nuclear arms treaties in a very, very small, it's about the size of a postage stamp, something like that. So,
yeah. Well, I on the other hand have dealt with the START treaty during my time in the Air Force. I secured nuclear weapons when I was in there. I've got a lot of experience with this. I'm actually in favor of it. I can't really talk too much about all the aspects of what it's like on that side of it, but
that Russian that heavy bomber limitation is something that just looking at it, to me, there's some stink to that. A bomber that's carrying multiple nukes gets counted as one. So basically, the race then becomes how many nukes can you fit on a plane, right? So you'd have to look at the airframes, in terms of their super bomber versus our big heavy bombers. How many can we carry and how many can they carry? And maybe that's what the race has become. I'm guessing. I'm totally guessing. But
that
to me, if I negotiated that treaty, I'd immediately start building bigger bombers, right? Put a second deck on the thing or whatever you have to do, because that's what becomes. Right? What the heck kind of rule is that?
That is a weird one. Yeah.
That is weird. That is really weird. I wonder I wonder what's behind that. So there have to be some intense negotiation over that. And at some point, they kind of all threw their hands up in the air and just said, "Look, we'll count it as one." And then there's this other thing where if it's not if it's sort of a standby warhead, it's not an activated warhead, you don't count it. So I mean, if I stick an on-off switch on the thing. Is that now deactivated? And I can't. How do you differentiate between the ones that are able to be used and the ones that can't be used? And now I start building missiles that I can ready for launch. In half the time that I could ready them for launch from beforehand. So that becomes the arms race, right? So maybe this whole treaty thing is just I have to look at it, but it's just it just shifts. It shifts what you begin racing against. As a matter of fact, right? Just in this conversation, we could say that's probably the case. That's what you're going to do. Is you're going to look to see how can I use the treaties that exist now to my advantage. Okay, I have to limit the number of warheads. How do we count the number of warheads? Okay, well, these ones don't count if I turn them off. Okay, well, I'll put these little switches on them so that I can turn them back on again very quickly. And my bombers only count as one. Well, I'm gonna double the capacity of my bombers. That's what I'm thinking. If I'm in the Department of Defense, as a matter of fact, it's your job to do that, right? You know, I mean, if you're the SecDef, right, that's the first thing you begin to do is say, hey, you know, how's this guy going to use this to his advantage? And my suspicion is, if I'm Putin, that's exactly what I'd be doing. I said, okay, well, give me the next generation of bomber on my desk because I want to sign that one right away. So your race just becomes different. That's basically what I'm guessing has happened here, but without reading about it, and you know, it's hard to say.
So one of the things that I find particularly interesting here about this too is that there were only 3 people in the room, from what I understand. The only people that were in the room were top level Trump aides or top level Trump people in the call here for Putin. And one of the things that the article doesn't really speculate on is whether or not Putin himself had leaked this, because we don't know who leaked this information. It could have been his top advisors. It could have been, and again, I think there was only like 3 people in that room, not including Trump himself, but also Putin. And Putin has been known to, you know, play and manipulate the media. Obviously, of what we saw with his WikiLeaks leaks and stuff like that. You may disagree with me on that, but I'm not sure where you do. You think that WikiLeaks was a shill for the Russians releasing the hacked information?
Well, Assange, I'm not sure Assange has come out and said that the source was not Russia. So, I mean, I don't think he'd have a reason to lie about that, right? So,
yeah, well, just because it's not Russia who gave him the source, this is a common intelligence tactic is to pass the information along. So even though they may not be getting the information directly from a Russian agent, the Russian agent could be the one providing the person that provided them, and it could go down a chain.
Quite possible. If I was running that, it's quite possible. If I was running an intelligence service, that's exactly what I would do. Is I'd leak it through a third party. That's what I do to my advantage.
Yeah.
How can you fault? Putin from doing that? These people are doing their jobs, really. You know, if you really think about it, they're you know, you can call it dirty fool if you want to, but that's where the world works, you know, and U.S. should be doing the same thing. If we've got secrets of the Russians that are going to help to influence things in our direction, we ought to be doing it. Should those acts be treated as potential acts of war? The fact that you're conducting espionage against the enemy's computer system? Quite certainly. It should be. So, you know, but you've got to prove it. That's the thing. You've got to prove it. And good intelligence service will have no fingerprints on that at all. They'll do a, what do they call it, dead letter drop or something like that, where they file documents, put them in a bag or dead drop or whatever, and leave it next to the bench, and then the other guy picks it up or whatever. So I wouldn't doubt that's the case, Mac, that Putin did that he leaked some of that information that went through a third party to, so what? I think it's the truth. If you really look at the matter of what got leaked, it's what's going on inside the DNC. And I'll bet that even if you could get inside the computer systems of the RNC, it would be not a fraction of what you saw in terms of the dirty dealings of the left. You know, what we saw in this last election was, you know, why didn't we want Hillary Clinton getting in charge? And you know, to me, it's because of people like Bob Kramer, who James O'Keefe caught on video. James O'Keefe caught Bob Kramer and Scott Fogel on video funding paid protesters to go in and start fights at Trump rallies. It's not controversial. They both resigned over it. Okay, that's fact. Okay, and the fact that the DNC and Bob Kramer, the head guy there, met with Obama 40 times personally. That's not a group meeting. It's him meeting with Obama during the last 8 years 40 times. That's who Kramer is, and hundreds of times he's been to the White House. And they're caught on tape saying that they're communicating with the DNC on this via phone to keep it hidden from the American taxpayer because it breaks the law to these 501c3 corporations. So you know, the stuff that got leaked is stuff that the Democrats should have lost on. It's breaking the law. It's inciting violence. It's thug politics. And so, the fact that Russia has to leak it and that our own FBI is not pursuing this sort of stuff is that's really what the story is here, right? But the FBI is not investigating. Why hasn't the FBI investigated these people? That's the bigger story, the corrupt justice system in the United States of America. And that's really why you're actually, I could say I'm thankful for Putin for leaking that crap, if that's the case.
I'm not. I wouldn't go as far as say thankful, but I'm happy I know the information, but I'm still pissed off that Russia is hacking into U.S. computer systems, even if they are.
Do you think we're not? Do you think we're not hacking the Russians?
Of course we are.
We're hacking the Russians?
Of course we are, and of course they are, and of course again, I wouldn't expect Russia to thank us for hacking their computer systems. They ought to be annoyed by it. Not that we shouldn't do it, because that's part of the game, but they're playing the game, we're playing the game. We shouldn't be thanking them for trying to be aggressive towards us, though. That's my point. But let's pivot here. Let's talk about another subject here. I want to ask you, first of all, what is your opinion of Edward Snowden?
Ooh, that's a toughie. Before I saw the documentary on him, I thought I really felt he was a traitor to the United States and should be prosecuted for his crimes and spend the rest of his life in jail for doing it. After watching the movie, somehow my mind has turned a little bit, and I see things from the lens of, okay, you're working for the government. The government is usurping the Constitution. Where do your loyalties lie? Do your loyalties lie with the agreement that you signed with the American government that if you leaked any of this information, you go to jail? Or do your loyalties lie with the fact that these people have violated their oaths and are turning this spying equipment on the American people, basically breaking our, what is it, your Fifth Amendment right to privacy? Is it Fifth or Fourth? I can't remember. I get those confused.
I think it's Fifth.
Okay, the Fifth Amendment right to privacy, where they need a warrant to secure this information.
That's your fourth for a warrant. But I think that they for the I think it was for abortion, wasn't it? They used the Fifth Amendment right to privacy in some way or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting confused. But yeah, your Fourth Amendment, that's that requires the federal government or the government in general to have a search warrant. So yes.
What's the documentary? Is it Citizen 4? Is that what it was?
I think that, but that's not the Oliver Stone one, is it? I don't think that's.
No, it's not. Citizen 4 is just footage of Snowden in his hotel rooms live doing this stuff, and it's pretty powerful. You can tell what is. Communication is not just in terms of voice or the written word. Most of communication, as a matter of fact, is in terms of your physical presence, your body language, what's going on in your face. And after watching that, I believe he's altruistically motivated. I don't think he did this for any sort of publicity stunt or something like that. But he really felt that the government was out of control. So now, what do you do about that? I'll turn that around on you. And I guess you asked me a question: is do I think it was right? Do I think it was wrong? I think it was wrong, and I wouldn't have done it. Okay, under any circumstances, I'm deadly afraid of running afoul of the law. So I would not have done what he did. Having done what he did. Geez, what do? You say, basically, you say the ends justifies the means, right? That, I can break the law if it's for the greater good. I don't know if I believe that or not. So, I don't know. I'll turn around to you and say, what do you think should be done?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll answer that. But let me first, I want to play a clip here. This is me 3 years ago talking about Edward Snowden. And this is my original opinion here. And I don't even remember what I thought back then. Let me see if it coincides with what I think now. Here's a clip. It's loading. Hey everybody, Mac here with On The Move. Alright, we're going to talk about Edward Snowden for a few seconds here. To you guys, and I want to know, honestly, let me know your opinions here, guys. Do you think he's a hero whistleblower, or do you think he's a treasonous person who should have just kept his mouth shut? I need to know, want to know your guys' opinions. In my personal opinion, I love what he did. I think it's something that everybody already knew and assumed. I mean, we've had movies like Enemy of the State telling us that the NSA's been doing stuff like this for the past decade, and it's common knowledge that the NSA had program Echelon back in the 80s. So that's not even a surprise to anyone anymore. It's already been known that you say keywords on your telephone and the NSA is recording it. So why is it such a big deal that Edward Snowden releases information? And why is it such a big deal that it's a crime that he told? In my personal opinion, he is a hero. He's definitely totally shattered his whole universe. His life is now different, and it will never be the same. He's always going to have to be looking over his shoulder. In my opinion, that's a definition of a hero. Sacrificing everything to get some information out there. And you know what? It's already information that we already knew too. So I don't understand why there's this big outrage and why we are supposed to be surprised that this is happening. And the thing that's surprising to me is that we've put up with it for so long, and that nobody's done anything to these government officials that have, on the record, lied and said, no, we're not listening to your phone calls. And then, when the government just recently, they went through and they got a bunch of our phone records, and they called it the transactional data. Is the only thing that they pulled is the transactional data, and that means the data from I call you, and they can see my telephone calls, who I call, and they can probably also see our text messages, and websites you visited, email traffic to who knows. But regardless, we know that they're able to see much more than that and everything. So I think most people have already operated under the assumption that they're doing it anyway. All right, my question to you guys, all right? This is basically a philosophical question in regards to the Constitution. We've been allowing this stuff to go on for so long now through other nations and other countries. Why has it been okay for us to spy on foreigners when we think that it's not okay for them to spy on us? But also on top of that, the Constitution, these are all human rights, not just American rights, human rights. No one gave them to us. The American government did not just, all piously give us these rights. These are human rights, and we've allowed our government to already to violate human rights on people from other countries. It's no wonder that they've turned these rights against us. They have no respect for these human rights. So, okay, now to the question. All right, so basically, it's pretty similar to where I stand today. 3 years ago, that was an interesting process, going back and looking at where I stood before. I wouldn't go so far as to call Edward Snowden a hero today, but I do think that he did do a heroic act in releasing this information. I agree with what I said 3 years ago, and I stand by what I said as far as his entire life has changed and will forever be changed because of what he did. He could potentially face prison time still. And this leads us to this article here. This is Fortune.com. Snowden may return to U.S. as gift from Russia, report says. Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor who published explosive details about U.S. intelligence activities, has lived in exile in Moscow since 2013. Now he could be sent home to face espionage charges. According to NBC News, U.S. intelligence sources have obtained information that says Russia may extradite Snowden as a gift to win favor with the new president, Donald Trump. The president has in the past described Snowden as a traitor who should be executed. Snowden's lawyer says he has no knowledge of such a plan to send his client to the U.S. The NBC report cites two sources in the U.S. intelligence community who suggest the Snowden proposal is recent and that it's one of several options Russia is considering. Now, FYI, folks, this is something that I said is a potential to happen in the first place. I've already said that Snowden could potentially come back, considering that Russia and Trump have kind of been cozying up to each other. I suspected that Snowden could potentially come back because his little time there where he's protected by the Russian government is coming to an end soon, very, very soon. So Again, I think that some of the reason why Russia actually is harboring Snowden is kind of to stick a middle finger in the face of the Obama administration. But now it's a bargaining chip to gain favor with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has already said that he's a traitor. It should be executed. First of all, Dan, do you disagree with Donald Trump on that aspect, or?
Yeah, no. I mean, execute him. I don't think we should execute him. What should be done with Snowden? I think what should be done. What I would like to see happen is the status quo, to be quite honest with you, because I think by taking him back, if Trump does go after him with a vengeance, he's going to alienate his base. So the conservative base is going to be eroded from underneath him because of this. Because I think that a lot of people, while there are a lot of conservatives that think he should be executed as a traitor or at least in prison because he's a traitor, I think there are a lot of libertarian sites that, say that if you break your word, if you break your contract with the U.S. government in order to expose people that are undermining the Constitution, well, there really shouldn't be any crime there. And Trump's going to alienate those people.
Yeah, I would agree, although I don't think he's going to alienate his base. I don't necessarily think that conservatives are his base. I think it's more of a populist style base. But
libertarians came out in droves, Max. So but base, maybe base is not, but people who voted for him. Max, one thing I don't want to. One thing I think that needs to be brought up here is that the real point, okay, is that nothing's been done. To my knowledge, maybe you know differently than I have, but nothing's been done about these NSA systems that were directed inwardly, that were formally directed outwardly against terrorists.
Agreed.
I mean, it's still as much of a problem, and they're still allowed to do these warrantless wiretaps and that sort of stuff. But what do they call them? FISA warrants that were, and that sort of thing. That's all still ongoing. And,
at least
the
they
real
have
crime
warrants now, but before they weren't even getting warrants. They were just bulk collecting the data. They had again the metadata, and also one of the things we talked about on the last episode was these national security letters. I don't understand why this is not the top story in the nation. Twitter releases national security letters. Basically, over the last 8 months, tech companies have slowly been revealing that they've been receiving national security letters from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that force the firms to secretly disclose user data to the government. And they have gag orders placed on them, telling them that they can't even talk about it until they're told that they can. So we don't even know how many of these national security letters, NSLs, these tech companies have out there, because they're denied the right to even talk about it. So we don't even know what the feds are doing. We don't know what information they have and how much data collecting they are doing. But it seems to me, and this is just my opinion and I guess my prediction for the Trump administration, I foresee that these NSA spying programs are going to continue and probably expand.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to see more violations of what I would consider violations of the Fourth Amendment, our Fourth Amendment protection from the government, where they're required to get a warrant. Not a general warrant where it says, you can get all the information from anybody who's a customer of Verizon. They have to specifically say what the things that they're going to search and what they're going to seize. They can't just blanket say, everybody who's an AT&T customer, we can get all your information. As long as it's just metadata, by the way. And metadata, for those of you who don't know, that it was the transactional data that I was talking about in that video. The transactional data is not like it's nothing. It's not like I can't tell what's going on in some ways with transactional data. Like, for example, Dan, if I see you call up a doctor and then you call up a pharmacy and then you're looking at a website about gonorrhea and then you call up a bunch of women on your phone contacts, I have a pretty good idea of what is going on with your scenario just by looking at your transactional data.
Right.
There's a lot of information that can be exposed with that, and I don't think that the government has a right to just collect data on you for no reason at all. If they don't have probable cause, they don't have reasonable suspicion, and they don't have a warrant, they shouldn't be looking at your stuff. What do you think, Dan?
I agree. And the metadata almost worse because like you were saying, you can draw conclusions and even false conclusions. It'd be easy to come up with some scenarios where you could look at that and come up with some idea that's totally off the wall and wrong. Like say you were researching child pornography or something to write a paper on it or something like that, right? There's and up pops all these metadata tags that you're searching on all these sites. Well, it's easy to draw a false conclusion from that. Have the FBI busting your door down and grab all your computers and stuff like that. The founding fathers protected against that. They have the Stamp Act that the British, the redcoats would go door to door and say, hey, there's a piece of furniture. Show me the fact that you've paid a tax on that thing, and you just barge in your house and do that. And when they wrote the Constitution, they said that's one of the things we want to protect against. So they wrote it into the Constitution. And right now, the government is blatantly breaking that.
Agreed.
And Bush was one of the largest offenders, right, with the Patriot Act. That they said, in the name of protecting us, we're going to allow them to spy into your computer systems. And that's not a white life. You quickly realize that's not a life worth living, where the government has visibility into everything that goes on inside your household. And I think that's a growth thing. It is. It's a growth thing for Trump too. I think honestly, Mac, that he doesn't realize. He's like, oh, safety first. I want to make it a safe place. Okay, well, you make it a safe place that nobody wants to live in because the government has insights into your most private affairs inside of your life. And so I think that's a growth thing for Donald Trump. It's part of the bad that we took with Donald Trump, that's for sure, is the fact that he supports these measures which are anti-American. Up to me, there's some. You got to take the good. The good is, hey, let's put up a wall and enforce our borders and kick all these people out of here that are illegally here. I think that's a positive thing. Okay, the negative thing is that he says, hey, you know what? We want to keep these systems in place. We have the NSA spying on your average everyday American and drawing conclusions from their metadata. And, getting back to what you were saying about these letters that are going to be served by the NSA, this is no shock. I mean, there's people that have come forward and said there are entire rooms in AT&T, right, that are sitting there that are off limits to their own employees that are run by the NSA. So they're running everything that comes in. This conversation, I'm sure, is being recorded and metatagged right now and going into a database with your name on it and my name on it. That's kind of scary, actually.
Hello, analysts out there listening to this conversation. Don't forget to go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click on the shop link and purchase some of our products on there, please. Feel free. Anyway, but here's the one thing I would like to point out. The one good thing that I think that this report from Fortune about how Snowden may be returning to the U.S. as a gift from Russia, it does kind of constitute some kind of proof that Snowden, as many have claimed to be, was an agent or a spy for Russia. And Snowden tweeted immediately after this report, he said, "Finally, irrefutable evidence that I never cooperated with Russian intel. No country trades away spies as the rest would fear their next." So I do think this kind of does, prove that he was not in cahoots with the Russian government. And I think it adds a little bit more credibility to Edward Snowden. If Donald Trump does get, Snowden delivered to him on a silver platter by Vladimir Putin, would you oppose prosecution of him, or do you think that he should be prosecuted?
Wow, it's hard to say that you will split the baby down the middle. 10 to 25, something like that. I hate to say it, but you'll never. I know his motives were good, but he's not a hero unless he pays the price for that. Has he paid the price for that by living in Moscow since 2013? Moscow's, I've been there before. It's not any place that I'd ever want to live, but it's not like living on the street either. So has he really paid the price here? He's paid a price. Has he paid enough? I don't know. I don't think he's reached hero status yet. Throw him in jail on 10 to 25 and let him get out on good behavior, I guess would be my thing. But you can't say we're not going to punish people for leaking secret data because people get killed. Okay, that's the problem. Is people get killed over it, and we can't have that as a country. So I would say, well, not execute him, but I do think he should stand trial for having violated his agreement, and that he should pay a price for that. I'm not sure what it is, but he should pay a price for it.
Well, I disagree. I personally, I understand where you're coming from as far as you should be protecting the data. I don't know of any, and perhaps there is information out there, but I don't think Snowden's leaks led to anybody's death in particular. Are you aware of any kind of stories like that?
I don't think you'll ever know, authoritatively, but it's possible it could have.
It very well could have, and that's an excellent point. Personally, I just think that this is a high-profile case. It could go a long way to showing that the government is admitting some of the things that they're doing is wrong here. And
they already have. I mean, there's no question that they've. But now now that the data is out, you're right. Snowden's a hero from that perspective. That there's no denying it and facing that you have a problem. Mm-hmm. And folks like Rand Paul have been alluding to it forever, right? Without actually coming forward and saying that it's happening, because of course he would be prosecuted for doing that because he's disclosing secret data. But true patriots have been alluding to it for a while, and Snowden is the one who confirmed those things. But in the process of confirming all of those details, it's impossible to say that won't have somebody put two and two together, that this guy's a spy and kill it. And you never even know that guy existed. CIA has operatives everywhere in the world, and could very well have, just the sheer volume of data that you talk, top secret data, beyond top secret compartmentalized data that this guy released. It's not like he released a few secret documents, Max. He did electronic transmission of top secret data.
So are you in favor of prosecuting Hillary?
Yes, of course. Emphatically, yes.
Okay.
Emphatically, yes. Yeah, make an example out of her. So, I mean, just the way Matt, you know Clarence. What do you think? What do you think about Hillary Clinton? I'll ask you that. Of course.
So
yes.
you can talk about the justification. Obviously, you broke the law, yada yada yada, all that, and you should be punished. I get that, but let's also keep in mind the political aspects of this as well. And I can see an argument being made on both sides of each one of these situations. Somebody broke the law, they ought to be prosecuted. They ought to be held responsible for breaking the law. Both Snowden and Hillary Clinton, I could see the argument. But from a political standpoint, I can also see the argument to not prosecute either one of them. I think that with Hillary, in relation to Hillary, I think that we're already really divided. I think that doing that could have the potential to divide us further. It also could set up a dangerous precedent where the President of the United States gets elected and starts prosecuting their person who ran against them. I don't see that probably happening, but who knows? I mean, you don't know where things are going to go. I just think it's probably better, politically speaking, to just let it go when it comes to Hillary. And I feel the same way when it comes to Snowden. I think that these two cases should be kind of looked at because they both did. I mean, one of them, intentionally dropped all this information out there to make it public. Another one just didn't care about taking any precautions on her email server that she had, and was sending and receiving classified material, secret material, top secret material, and special access material, which is above top secret. So both of them violated the law clearly, but should they both be prosecuted? I would say if it was my decision and I was the one deciding this, I wouldn't prosecute either, just for the political ramifications of both.
I would, and I would plea bargain. The way the system works is you plea bargain them out, and so they're all found guilty of everything, of something. And Mac, here's the problem: you've got to take the good with the bad. If you say that, okay, what you're basically saying is that there are two systems of justice, because you and I both know that if the airman out there, either carelessly or deliberately takes a memory stick from the nipper net over to the zipper net, okay, then he's going to go to jail. There's no question that he's going to at least be thrown out of the military with a dishonorable discharge. Okay, so what you do with not prosecuting these people is you say there are two systems of justice, and when you do that, you undermine the very foundations of our nation that say that we are all equal. Okay, so we're all created equal. So you, as someone who says, hey, in the interest of political expedience and getting on with life, we let Snowden off the hook and we let Hillary off the hook. That's the price that you pay, and it's not an obvious thing that's staring you in the face like when a nuclear bomb goes off and destroys a society, but it's the slow erosion of people in a society saying, "Hey, I'm less than these people are. We've got royalty again." Basically, that's what you have. You're saying, okay, we've got royalty again in the United States. That people like Hillary Clinton get away with stuff like that. And to me, that is a price that we have already paid, and it needs to be rectified. When people like Mike Strickland are prosecuted, and people like Hillary Clinton walk away with impunity, with the ability to break any law they feel fit to break, and they feel they can get away with it because they're rich and they know people.
I'm susceptible to both of these arguments. And actually, I like what you said as far as prosecuting them and essentially waiving any kind of prison time. I actually think that's an acceptable alternative because in the process of that, you're saying that, look, no one's above the law, but the punishment process of this, I personally, I don't think Edward Snowden should be punished. I think Hillary should be, but politically speaking, I just don't think it's to the. I think punishing her is to the detriment of our nation, not because she shouldn't be punished. I think she should be. She violated the law. I think intent is important, and I do think that the whole reason why she was hiding all this stuff was to obfuscate her activities and how interconnected they are to her activities in the Clinton Foundation with her activities in the State Department. So
absolutely, she made tens of millions of dollars on you and me on a tax. Look at, and Matt, you got to look at things like Martha Stewart. Okay, Martha Stewart went to prison. What did she do? She lied to the police once that I know of. She lied to them once. Okay, and I forget how long she went for. Okay, Hillary Clinton at least deserves the Martha Stewart treatment. At least, and so does Edward Snowden. I hate to say it. Okay, but both those people have to be. There has to be some ramifications for what they do to have fairness in our society. I hate to say it, equality. What we stand on as a country is all men created equal. Otherwise, some people get a pass and other people don't get a pass. And I think that's fundamentally who we are as American people. They have to pay a price for that. Particularly Hillary Clinton, because I can't stand her. But but her crime is less than Edward Snowden. So you really got to punish Snowden as well. I let him stand before a jury of his peers, or let the prosecutors plead him out, so that he, just like with Mike, they absolutely the same thing, that they should face the same justice that everybody faces. And then if we decide that system is corrupt and unfair, well, then we're at least using accurate data, and everybody's been subjected to the same system. But right now, you've got two systems of justice working in the United States, so the favored and the unfavored. And unfortunately, you and I are. You're lucky. You got not lucky. Chance favors the prepared mind. But Mac, you're the rare exception where justice actually prevailed. But that's an extremely rare thing in our society. I would have never predicted it, by the way. I thought you were SOL, man. But you did prevail in the end. You did. You're shocking to me, but you did. There is a modicum of justice, but it's almost on accident in our society that it happens. But it does happen occasionally.
Yeah, well, I was under the impression that I was going to be found innocent the entire time. I was shocked when I was found guilty in the first trial, only because things were going so well. It seemed like the prosecution, all of their witnesses seemed to be testifying upon my behalf. They all said I wasn't doing anything with the gun. By the way, for those of you who don't know, I was unlawfully arrested for open carrying a rifle in Vancouver, Washington, and I lost the first trial. I won an appeal. But anyway, in regards to that, I do feel like I'm rather lucky when it comes to that. But I thought I was going to win the whole time because I know the law and I knew what I did was completely legal. But let's move on to another topic here, Dan. I want to ask you, first of all, have you heard this article here? More than 12,000 tweets have called for Trump's assassination since the inauguration.
No. They should follow every one of them down. That's ridiculous.
I imagine that the Secret Service is working overtime right now. First of all, what are your basic thoughts on this this escalation of violent rhetoric coming from people on Twitter in regards to Obama and how the leftist media is covering it? Because, for example, if this was a let's say if this was Barack Obama, this would be all over the news, but I haven't heard it on any mainstream sites. Have you?
I believe it. I believe that that's the case. I have not read the headline, and of course there have been some very visible people that have threatened the president via social media and whatever, and the Secret Service has shown up. It's a Secret Service's job to investigate those and to come and talk to those people. So it doesn't surprise me. And I would also say that it ties back to the last conversation that we had, and that's that the left is getting away with everything. They beat me. They beat my camera into my face. No one's prosecuted. They take Steven Crowder by the shoulder and put 3 punches into his face. Right? Nothing is done about it. So if you're on the left, it's not even, will my threats be taken seriously and will I go to jail for that? It's not going to happen because our judicial system is corrupted in favor of the left. So they're going to take every advantage of that. And none of these people will go to jail. Watch, none of them will go to jail. They'll plead that out to misdemeanors or whatever for these threats. And of course, the law enforcement, that's extremely busy for them. For the consumes a number of resources because you've got to sort out the idle threats from the true black jobs who would go after the president, and that's going to be a huge job for the Secret Service to figure out where the real threats are in there, and because you can't chase them all down. If there are 12,000, like that article says, well, yeah.
That's pretty unbelievable. And again, to me, it just seems like the violence and violent rhetoric is almost happening exclusively on the left. The leftist media tried to paint out the Tea Party as a bunch of violent racists who, weren't necessarily saying anything racist, but there was this underlying tone, the secret tone that we talked about behind the scenes that wasn't in front of the cameras about how we hated Obama because he's black, not simply because of what we're saying about his policies of redistribution of wealth and that he's a socialist. They hear words like socialist and they think that we're being racist, whereas these people on the left are saying actual violent things, engaging in violent protests, in riots, and we're not the treatment is not equally here. I would say, and I would definitely agree that the system, the justice system itself, it doesn't treat us equally. With prosecutorial discretion, this is a conversation you and I have talked about almost ad infinitum. Personally, I'm not a fan of prosecutorial discretion, but again, there's just seems like there's a double standard in this. But
absolutely, this way. Let me throw that in there. That I agree with you on prosecutorial discretion. I mean, I don't know how you fix that problem without using some sort of automation that every crime will be prosecuted. If you look at artificial intelligence applied to the judicial process, maybe there's some way of letting the computers decide. And you've got a fixed basket of resources, so those prosecutors have to decide. But you have to look at examples as they're happening right in front of us, and that's this guy who's setting up the J20 protests in Portland that raped, by his own admission, he admits he did it, Matt. He admits that he had sex with boys and girls underage, okay? He admits it, and they release him, and he's been convicted previously of it, and it's on parole. I'll send you the link, okay? This guy gets convicted. They set his bail at $20,000. So he posts 10% of that. He's out on $2,000. He put on a credit card, okay? And Mike Strickland, who didn't harm anybody, and think of the harm that comes into the lives, the parents, the kids, the brothers, the sisters, the social workers that have to deal with those raped children, okay? And then you look at somebody like Mike Strickland. All he does is pull his gun out to defend himself, and he gets the book thrown at him, $250,000 for bail. So he's got to raise $25,000 to get out, okay? So the injustice that's built into the system is so obvious in front of us right now. And I'm at a loss, Matt, of how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it, except for, fighting, continue to fight. But I lack the tools. I know how to beat them in elections, okay? And that's expose them for what they are. And I guess we have to expose this judicial system, but it's a much more closed society. You can't go in to a judge's chambers wearing a wire. I mean, you'll go to jail. So I don't know how to fix this. I welcome your inputs on how to fix the judicial system, but I do not know how to fix it.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I gotta run. But this would be a good conversation for another day. Will you come back and talk with me about how to fix the judicial system, Dan?
I absolutely will, and I'll invite your listeners to go check out my videos at daylightdisinfectant.com, at youtube.com/daylightdisinfectant, and tweet me at daylightdis. And please, folks, go to the Oregon Firearms Educational Foundation, or the OFF, and join the organization, make a donation, and earmark it for the Mike Strickland Legal Fund.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dan. And guys, please go donate to Mike's legal fund. It's Oregon Firearms Federation. Please go donate. He's going to need your help in the upcoming appeal. Anyway, thanks, Dan. I really do appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, Mac. We'll catch you on the next show. I look forward to it.
All right. Take it easy, bud. All right, folks, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to finish up our last remaining featured topics here about how radicals on both sides are trying to blow up the system and who the players are on both sides. If I can, I might try to squeeze in Senator Warren being silenced on the Senate floor. I don't think we're going to make it to that today. We're down to about 11 minutes left, so I don't think we're going to have time for that. But anyway, we'll be right back after this break, folks. Don't go anywhere.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. We've got 9 minutes left in the program, and I'm just going to go ahead and change course here a little bit. I was going to talk about radicals on both sides, how they want to blow up the system, and who the players are on both sides, but this is not enough time to cover that. So we're just going to end the show here with Senator Warren silenced on the Senate floor. And this is one of the reasons why I titled this episode, Don't Fight Fire with Fire. All right? So first and foremost, I'm going to play the clip here of Senator Warren being shut down by the Republicans on the Senate floor. This is Elizabeth Warren. And by the way, any conversation that first starts out with this topic about this topic should start out by saying that Senator Warren is a awful human being. She's just terrible. She's using this as a chance to elevate her career. This is all about 2020, folks. I've already told you, folks like Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, those kind of people are trying right now to vie for the top spot in the Democrat Party, and they're all trying to be the next person in line. So Senator Warren here on the floor of the Senate being shut down by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. Here we go.
Enforcement of those laws.
The senator is reminded that it is a violation of Rule 19 of the standing rules of the Senate to impute to another senator or senators any conduct or motive unworthy or becoming a senator.
Mr. President, I don't think I quite understand. I'm reading a letter from Coretta Scott King to the Judiciary Committee from 1986 that was admitted into the record. I'm simply reading what she wrote about what the nomination of Jeff Sessions to be a federal court judge meant and what it would mean in history for her.
This is a reminder, not pertinent necessarily what you just shared. However, you stated that a sitting senator is a disgrace to the Department of Justice.
I think that may have been Senator Kennedy.
And this,
although I would be glad to repeat it in my own words.
the rule applies
Then I'm
to imputing conduct or motive through any form or voice to a sitting form of words includes quotes, articles, or other materials.
So, quoting Senator Kennedy, calling then nominee Sessions a disgrace is a violation of Senate rules. It was certainly not in 1986.
In the opinion of the chair, it is.
So let me understand then.
And the senator is warned.
So can I ask a question in the opinion of the chair? I want to understand what this rule means.
The senator will state her inquiry.
So is it the contention of the chair that under the rules of the Senate, I am not allowed to accurately describe public views of Senator Sessions, public positions of Senator Sessions, quote, public statements of Senator Sessions?
The chair has not made a ruling with respect to the senator's comments.
The chair has not made a ruling as respect to the senator's comments.
The senator is following process and tradition.
The senator is following process and tradition.
By reminding the senator from Massachusetts.
By reminding this.
Who the heck is reading this to the chair here? This is very interesting. He's being fed information from somebody.
Senator of Massachusetts of the rule.
Well, I'm asking for what this rule means in this context. So can I continue with Coretta Scott King's letter?
The senator may continue.
Thank you. They are mothers, daughters, sisters, fathers, sons, and brothers.
Mr. President.
They are...
Mr. President.
The majority leader.
The senators impugn the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama as warned by the chair. Senator Warren, quote, said Senator Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens.
This is Senator Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader. By the way, he's my representative in Kentucky.
I call the senator to order under the provisions of Rule 19.
Mr. President.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate. I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
And they shut her down because, why? Well, Rule 19, you can't violate Rule 19. You can't talk bad about a senator in Congress on the Senate floor. You just can't do it. You can't talk bad. Why? Because they have a special protection. They're a special class of people, folks. You can't talk bad about them in the Senate. No. Now, look, I will say, first of all, Rule 19 is a load of horse dookie. And first of all, let's point out, this has been getting so much play to the point where it's on my show even right now and other news shows around the world and the internet. There's so many people talking about Elizabeth Warren being shut down now. If they would have just let her read that, it was on, C-SPAN 2? No one would have cared. No one would have even known that she was reading this or saying these things. But the fact that you made a big deal about it, now everybody knows. And again, it's showing, it's giving a big freaking gift to the left-leaning media. Oh, look how bad the Republicans are. They just want to silence people. They want to shut people down. Well, look, let me point out, and by the way, another situation that involved Mitch McConnell. I supported Ted Cruz when he called Mitch McConnell a liar on the Senate floor, and they didn't shut him down, to my knowledge. Maybe they did. Perhaps they did. I can't quite remember. But here's a clip of Ted Cruz. I supported him doing this.
The majority leader looked me in the eye and looked 54 Republicans in the eye. I cannot believe he would tell a flat-out lie. And I voted based on those assurances that he made to each and every one of us. What we just saw today was an absolute demonstration that not only what he told every Republican senator, but what he told the press over and over and over again was a simple lie.
So I supported Ted Cruz when he said this. I support Elizabeth Warren's right to say what she wants on the Senate floor. I don't believe in restricting speech. Censorship is never a good thing. The answer to speech you don't like is more speech, not less speech. But apparently, the Republicans don't agree. This is the wrong tactic. This is wrong-headed. And this is a failing tactic, which I think will come back to haunt them. But we are out of time today, folks. I certainly do appreciate you tuning in. MacPack, you were the tip of the spear, and thank you for your continued support. I really do appreciate you. Big shout-out to Dick LaPree, and shout-out to Dan Sandini. Check out loanmind.com, loanmind.com. That's Dick LaPree's website, and daylightdisinfectant.com. That's Dan's website. Also, don't forget to check us out every Sunday here at OnTheMoveShow.com. You can also check out our podcast on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. We simulcast on the 405media.com for the first hour. Shout out to the 405media.com. Also, we are simulcasted for the entire show at youthrevolt.org, youthrevolt.org. Please show them some love. And don't forget to check us out and follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. That really does help us. If you made it this far in the program, smash the like button on whatever platform you're listening to. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And check out our shop link on our homepage, OnTheMoveShow.com. We got lots of original designs on there. Anyway, that's our show. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.